What's up, folks? Welcome back to the third stream of Thursday. It's third stream Thursday. We are live with the alleged full rules of 11th edition Warhammer 40k in terms of its core rules. We talked about this a little bit earlier this morning. Basically, this document dropped. Actually, I have the document here. Which was an alleged series of pictures taken from the French version of the rulebook, which were then translated using a hack job AI translation software, and looked fucking atrocious. It looked to me like the documents were totally erroneous and wrong, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. We do have a much better translation nowadays. So what we're going to be going... I basically looked at a couple of translations of these documents. This is the version that made the most sense to me. So we're going to be reviewing them. Obviously, the world's biggest fucking grain of salt with all of this, because there is certainly the case, the opportunity for these to have been machine generated. Definitely some of the original translations were certainly very, very poorly done. Although I have been told by a couple different people that it is likely that at the very least the core rule pictures are real. They've just been scanned in at a scanner, kind of hack, sort of a hack job. But they are most likely real. I don't know. We'll see. So we'll talk about them. Obviously, big giant heaping portion of salts with all of these rules for sure. Ryan G, thank you for the super chat. I don't know why that didn't play. I do have the alert on. It just didn't work. So I don't know what's up. Yeah, it is on. So just YouTube being fucky wucky, I guess. Not sure. League of Legends, level assault for sure. So what we have here, this is a direct translation of the just the text. I do have the document, the raw document. So if we need to see diagrams, the diagrams are here. And as you can see, obviously the diagrams are the same as the ones that we saw in the or that we have seen in the live streams, which does sort of lend credence. They are sort of fucked, but that could very well, it's cursed as hell, but that could very well be explained by the fact that this has been scanned in by software. So who knows? You know what? Who knows at this point? It does look to me like a lot of the diagrams are sort of the same style, which certainly does lend credence to its veracity. But we don't know that for sure. So we'll go through, and basically, if we need to look at a diagram, we'll look at a diagram, but otherwise we'll be just looking at the text. So I do apologize for the fact that the rules are going to be really boring looking, because it's mostly just these raw text on a white background here. So anyway, so starting at the moving section, it doesn't look like a lot of the rules have changed here. You can move through your friendly models. What it doesn't say is that you cannot move through monsters and vehicles, which is, I think, implied by the flying rules that we have already seen. And I do wonder if it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. It just says you can go through, figurine ami, which I think is friendly models, which is interesting. That would be a pretty impactful departure. It would allow you vehicles to go through other vehicles, which would be big, unless there's a rule in the vehicle section. So I guess we'll keep an eye on that so we'll see. The age of high-res cameras. It looks to me like this is probably like a photocopier scanner, one of those scanning a book in a photocopier always comes up with these weird fucking artifacts because you end up bending the page, right? But who knows? What's my level of French? High school level French. It is not very good. I will not say that I am fluent or very conversant in French. Assuming they didn't scan the actual pages. Well, I imagine at this stage, this would probably be a distribution copy, right? Like they are probably setting up their fulfillment lines because I expect that they're going to fulfill within 3 to 4 weeks. So this is the time period in which you would have like warehouses and fulfillment centers getting the copies, and somebody could easily just break one open at that point, which I imagine is where this comes from. Every time you move a model in a straight line, you move it horizontally across the battlefield, measure from the same point on the base at the start to the end of the movement, then add that distance to any distance that has already moved since the end it began its movement. The total distance moved cannot exceed the maximum distance of the movement type. We love that. That's very clear. Each time you pivot a model, and this is obviously based on this diagram, which we have already seen on live streams here, you rotate it as desired around the center of its base while keeping it upright. Note that a pivoting model does not count towards the distance it has moved. You pivot for free, which is a huge change, and obviously some particular models and unit types benefit immensely from that. The important thing to keep in mind, and what I think they're trying to showcase with this pivot rule, is that it is important to note that you must, while moving your model, you do have to physically pivot it, right? While you're moving it. That it doesn't add to your movement, but it does take up space on the board. So if there are areas or model or like things that you cannot move through, then you do have to ensure that you have space to pivot in relation to them. So like in this case, the Rhino has to move basically past the apex of the ruin here to then pivot, to then continue its movement. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I think a lot of people are going to fuck that up, and I do think that this rule does have the potential to be abused in some cases where people will just be like, oh, I'm going to go over here, and then they measure like from the... I wish I had my telestrator. They measure from like the corner to the corner to the corner, and then rotate however they want, and you're like, well, actually, you'd need about 3 inches of clearance around the edge of that ruin wall in order to successfully pivot like that. So you do actually have to do the... have to like perform the maneuver, but it does open up the potential for a ton of sort of mobility. If you're ending a movement, you must end a movement on the battlefield in cohesion, which we'll talk about later on. There's a little bit of a controversy with the cohesive rules. We'll see. You cannot move on top of or overlapping the surface of a terrain feature. So the terrain features, as we've learned in the past, are definitionally different than the terrain features we have currently. A terrain feature means this. It means the vertical element of terrain. The terrain area is the total like 2-dimensional footprint of the terrain. So when it talks about terrain features, it's always going to talk about the 3-dimensional elements, which is important to keep in mind. So, and I imagine that there will just be special keywords that allow like Infantry Beast Swarm to go on top of terrain features, which then, so basically no model at a baseline can go on top of terrain features. However, some models will have a special effect that allows them to do so. So vehicles and monsters and things won't be able to, unless most likely they have the flying keyword. If any condition is not met, so after moving conditions are a special, as we've seen in like the pile in and consolidate rules that we've been shown by the battle report recently. That's like a special category that's under each of your movements. So I like that. That's very clean. If any condition is not met, the unit cannot perform the movement, and its models are returned to where they were before they began. Otherwise, after resolving the rules in the after moving section of the movement type, the movement is complete. What it doesn't say here, and what I'm sure it will say maybe in specific movement rules, is that it doesn't say you have to end outside engagement range of enemies. But I imagine that is going to be covered in the rules for each movement type. We did have an open question that the current incarnation of the pile-in rules, as we know them, can theoretically allow a unit to pile into a new enemy unit with which they were not engaged at the start of that movement. And I think I don't know if that will actually be the case in the current version of the core rules. If you can't place a unit... This section explains on how you place units on the battlefield. On a sidebar. Oh, like over here? Interesting. If you are active, place a unit as part of movement type, and it's not possible to place all of the model's units, so that's like setting up on the battlefield, right? Return them to their previous position, as the unit cannot be chosen to perform the movement. It may be chosen to attempt a movement later. You may try a different placement. Yeah, I think that's... If you like try to ingress move and you can do so in coherency. Before your units can move and fight, they must be placed onto the battlefield. This generally happens before you deploy your army, but also in some other circumstances. Each time a roll asks you to place a unit, place its models on the battlefield such that it's in cohesion, it's not engaged, all other restrictions are respected. So that's for like ingress moves and setting up out of a transport. Ooh, my phone's exploding right now, chat. The coherency rules. Units containing more than one model must be placed and end any type of movement in cohesion. A unit is in cohesion if both of the following conditions apply to all of its models. And this is where things get a little controversial because they might have fucked it up. And this is so funny. This is like, it just tickles me to no end because it's immediately the first thing you think about anytime any coherency rule is written down. So you have two restrictions. Each model in the unit must be less than 2 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertical from one other model in the unit. Each model in the unit is 9 inches or less horizontally and 5 inches vertically from all other models in the unit. This allows you to, by definition, place two models so that, you know, they're within 2 inches of one other model in the unit. Two models on one side of the table, and then 9 inches away from them, two other models. All four of those would be considered to be incoherency by these rules. Probably requires a D1 errata, which is fucking hilarious because that's immediately the loophole that everyone goes to. Anytime you try to write these chain unit rules, like chain entity rules, for literally any game, somebody goes, what if I only have two guys by themselves? Are they incoherency? And they fucked it up. This is also, I believe, is basically the same verbiage is used in the diagram that we have from the live stream earlier this week. So I don't think that there's nothing that speaks to me that this verbiage would be different in the AI hallucination. The cover is 10th edition. On this one. This is, I don't know, Core Rules version 11. I don't know. And this one specifically, or this one? This one does not have a cover. So I have no idea. The documents that I'm looking at don't have any covers or anything. So that I don't think there's like any way that this doesn't get played the way that's intended. The diagram obviously the cover rules for this. Yeah. So the cover rules in the reason I didn't talk about these leaks earlier is that a bunch of the rules either didn't make sense or were from 10th edition. This version that we're looking at right now doesn't seem to have those issues. I did look through some of the ones I had picked up on earlier from one of the earlier documents that had been circulating. So I believe, if there was one to believe, I think it would be this one. And I imagine too, like I haven't looked through the entire document in here, but I imagine that if you went through and raw translated from the French for specific sections, you would probably find that I imagine it's correct. Once we get like towards the section, I'm sure we can look at the cover rules that are in that version. But there definitely were some documents that were floating around that were super duper fucked. Whether or not they were intentional hoaxes or they were, people trying to use AI to translate things and fucking it up because AI is stupid. I don't know. But this one does use the ballistic skill modification cover rule, which is obviously helpful. But as I said, we can look at the coherency diagram that's in this document, which is not here apparently. Am I stupid? No, here it is. The coherency document obviously describes that all models must be in a chain. I believe that basically every previous edition of 40k has essentially said that you must be 2 inches of at least one other model in a unit, such that every model in the unit forms an unbroken chain to at least 2 inches apart, or up to 2 inches apart. They just didn't say that here. So there's no way that this gets, sort of like actually played in this way. At the end of player turn step of each turn, if one or more units of the battlefield are not in cohesion, the players controlling those units must remove models from them one at a time until those units are in cohesion. Models removed this way are destroyed, but do not trigger any rule that applies when a model is destroyed, exactly as 10th edition. The interesting thing is that a lot of the stuff that you can do with that has not been removed from the game, so you can remove any model that you want until the unit's back in coherency, which could be up to one model remaining in the unit. So you could destroy basically 90% of a unit in order to retain cohesion, which could in some cases unengage you from enemies and things. What's the issue if you played cohesion as written? The only requirement is that at least two, but basically the only requirement is that all models have one other model within 2 inches and all models are within 9 inches of each other. So you basically create this big 9-inch circle, and then within that circle, everyone can be pairs of 2. You don't need to, like, the 2 pairs of 2 don't need to have a chain next to them. I guess maybe it's time for MS Paint, chat. Ready? Here we go. It's MS Paint time. So let's say we have our models. Here is one of our models, and here is another one of our models. We have our gray line, which is going to be our 9-inch coherency bubble, like this. If I also have 2 more models that are here, these guys are within 9 inches of each other. They're within 9 inches of all other models in the unit, because this is a 9-inch thing, right? And these guys are within 2 inches, and these guys are within 2 inches. Which means every model fulfills all the requirements for coherency. Each model is within 2 inches of at least one other model in the unit, and all models in the unit are within 9 inches of each other. So this would, rules as written, be eligible coherency. We correct coherency. I doubt that there's any chance in hell that gets played that way. Time to paint with... Yeah, I'll lose my 10 points for battle ready for sure. Yeah. So... and like, you know, you could, you know, what's the word? Extrapolate this out to be like a unit is this fucking weird cloud of like, you know, protons essentially. It's this electron cloud of miniatures that ends up being in coherency as long as they have one buddy, which I is explicitly not the intention of the rule. You know, the diagram showcasing that every model is within 2 inches of a chain. They just didn't write the part where you have to be in a chain. They just like left that out. So I think that gets house ruled on day 1 and then likely gets a day 1 errata. Engagement. The engagement range of a model is the area of a battlefield within 2 inches or less horizontally and 5 inches vertically of it, as long as a friendly model is within the engagement range of one or more enemy models. Those models and the units they belong to are engaged with each other. I should mention as well that there are 3 sections missing here. This starts at section 3 for the document that I have. Which means that I think that there's probably definitions for like friendly and enemy, for example. And I imagine friendly just means, you know, models in the army, the models belonging to one player's army are friendly to each other and to that player is what I assume that the definition is going to be. But those are not in the document that I currently have. So there are potentially additional rules context that we don't necessarily have. As long as a friendly model is in the engaged range of one or more enemy models, those models and the units they belong to are engaged with one another. As long as a unit contains no engaged models, that unit is not engaged. Fair enough. Let's go. What's interesting, it says models are better off staying out of enemy reach, but what it doesn't say is like that there's any specific rules against it. But I imagine that will be under, like, you can't set up an engaged range of enemies, right? Because the placement rules specify you cannot set up engaged. And I imagine that movement rules will require that you remain unengaged, but we'll see. Well, the problem is that, like, if you do the proton cloud system, then the electron cloud system of model placement, it's like even more stupid because you have to make sure you have these like 2-inch things. Like, if this actually is the intention of the rule, which I fucking doubt so heavily, you still have to use this buddy system. It just feels like even dumber. It is, in fairness, like, having done some sort of test positions with it, I do like this coherency rule so much more than the 2x2 coherency from 10th edition. The 2x2 coherency from previous editions was a nightmare. And now you don't have to dog bone out or do all this other bullshit. It is much easier, but it does seem implied to me that you still have to form the big chain. We know what friendly enemy mean without the need for definitions. Yeah, but that's not really how like rules work. Like we can intuit what friendly versus enemy mean, but rules are effectively a piece of software. You have to tell the piece of software what they're doing with it. Like us as a player can add additional rules context, but that is a dangerous precedent to set because if we assume we know the definition for things, we could get a lot of things wrong. So at any point there is a game term used. That game term should be defined. And there are plenty of instances, even in the current edition. We even had one come up in our game that we're streaming on Twitch earlier, where having a term not defined creates lots of issues. In that case, it was the each time timing step, which does not exist in the rules and creates lots of ambiguity, which is awesome. Performing attacks. Each time a unit shoots or fights, the active player follows the steps. Choose weapon, choose target to resolve attacks. You choose weapons for each model in the attacking units. Models make shooting attacks with ranged weapons and melee attacks with melee weapons. When shooting, you choose one or more ranged weapons. When fighting, you choose one melee weapon. I love the terminology exactly one melee weapon. The other one I love, it's just like rules writing, like fun rules writing stuff is one and only one. That's the other one, but exactly one fulfills the same purpose. If a model has no ranged weapon, it cannot make shooting attacks. And if a model has no melee weapon, it cannot make melee attacks. That tracks. When shooting or fighting, you may choose different targets for each weapon. If you cannot choose a target for a weapon, or if you decide to not choose a target for a ranged weapon, model equipped that weapon makes no attacks with it. So that's interesting. You can select. It is within the rules that you can simply choose not to fire your gun. Which is obviously important. Sometimes you don't want to attack with your entire unit, and you only want to attack with very specific weapons, so as not to trigger abilities. Some models have pistol weapons. That feels wrong. Is that true? I don't think they do. Have those not been reworded to close quarters weapons, chat? Can we find where in the rules it says this? Sorry, I'm on my face cam right now, just so I'm not. If I'm like, if I'm scrolling through pages, I don't want to like flash people with just a bunch of stuff. What page of the actual document are we at? It doesn't seem like these necessarily the pages don't like correspond perfectly. Like I think the pages are there, but they're in a different order, which is very annoying. Here we go. Okay. So it does say I'm gonna have to use my Google Translate foo here, I think. There is this section that talks about combat, what is it, rapproche, which I think is close quarters. That does sort of throw this translation document into yeah, that means close combat. So I believe that this is just wrong. It's just using old verbiage, which is not ideal. Man, fucking generative AI is so stupid, dude. I don't like what is even is the yeah, it does mean sort of close combat essentially. Is the direct translation, which I imagine is like very easily sort of localized into close quarters weapons, which is the new definition of pistol weapons. This is incorrect. This does not exist anywhere in the new rules. Oh boy. Okay. Interesting. Well, there you go. Now, I believe that we know that basically the close quarters weapon systems have not changed at all between 10th and 11th edition, because we have seen those rules directly. We have been shown them by GW, and we know that the close quarters attacks are essentially no different than they were previously, which is interesting. Maybe AI translated multiple times. I mean, it could have been. It could have been translated in the first place, but we have been like noticing more and more errors in this translation. It is heartening, I guess, to note that this does look correct, right? So I think I guess, you know, this does look a little bit better than the translation does, but the translation is clearly wrong here. Interesting. Well, that goes on alongside our heap of salt here, Chant. Choosing targets and shooting or fighting, you may choose different targets for each weapon if you cannot choose a target for a weapon, or if you decide not to choose a target for a ranged weapon. The model equipped with that weapon makes no attacks with it. What they don't choose is like range. Oh, here we go. In the choosing target section, when shooting. It's an interesting question. What section is this? 401. The section 3 goes. Oh, this is like out of order. We just moved to section 6 in this document for no reason. So the document with the diagrams is actually just like wildly out of order. This document seems like the order is correct. Anyway, let's see. So you must not be engaged. You must. Or your target must not be engaged. You must be visible to the model that has the weapon, and you must be within range of the weapon. When fighting, your target must be engaged with the model with the weapon, and you cannot choose more targets than the attack characteristic of the weapon. So because melee weapons, you choose exactly one model. Because melee weapons can choose one or more targets, you just can't choose more targets than you could possibly attack. What it doesn't say is that you have to divide your targets. I guess that's in the gather attack dice, right? That's interesting. Choose one of the enemy units targeted by one or more weapons. Choose a weapon targeting that unit, the target unit, and not yet used to make attacks against it, and gather a number of D6s equal to the attack characteristic of the weapon. These are the attack dice. Each represents an attack made by an attacking model of that weapon. If one or more weapons may, yeah. So we already have seen these diagrams. Oh, here's the section for splitting melee attacks. If you choose more than one unit as the target of a melee weapon, you must split the attacks of the weapon among those target units. To do so, declare how many attacks from that weapon will be made against each unit. At the gather attack dice step, for each weapon splitting its attacks, gather as many attack dice for that weapon as the number of attacks you declared against the relevant target. Neat. Cool. All right. Well, that answers my question. This certainly implied that when you split your attacks into multiple targets, the first one would just eat all your attacks anyway. But obviously, this little section just dictates exactly how you do that. It does define what identical attacks are down here as well. Identical attacks are attacks that share the same ballistic skill, weapon skill, strength, AP, and damage characteristics, and are affected by the same applicable role. I think it probably means special roles and abilities. Okay, fair enough. So it's no longer identical weapon profiles, because that was a problem in 10th edition, where if you had weapons that either had different stats elsewhere in the sort of like sequence, right? Where your range characteristic was different, would split you into a new profile, or the name of the weapon was different, would split you into a new profile. And so in some cases, you could actually like split apart weapons that were identical profiles but different names, so that you could sequence them in a way that was like better for you. It was very stupid, but just being like, it just says if it does the same amount of damage, then it's going to be in the same attack pool. What it does mean, though, it's important to note, is that regardless of hit rolls, ballistic skill, weapon skill characteristic is the only check, according to this, of course, is the only check for whether or not your weapons are grouped. So, for example, if I have a ballistic skill 2 bolter and a ballistic skill 3 bolter, but my ballistic skill 3 bolter is benefiting from a +1 to hit, which would cause all of them to hit on 2s, it wouldn't matter because their ballistic skill is different. I would split them into two separate attack sequences, and the attack sequences are very relevant in this case, which means I would still have to roll those separately according to this, obviously. They could further define this as like hitting on the same value instead of identical weapon skill ballistic skill characteristics, but I think it's an important clarification to make because every once in a while that's going to come up. So then you resolve attacks by choosing the enemy unit targeted. You choose one of the weapons attacking, gather the number of d6s equal to the attack characteristic. These are the attack dice, and each represents one attack made by the attacking model with that weapon. If you all have identical attacks, you group them all together. Then you resolve the attack sequence, which is, I guess, a whole separate chapter for all of the attack dice. Then once you go through the thing, you roll all the other ones, yeah. We've already seen the diagram that governs exactly how these operate, and it's interesting. So for those who haven't seen it before, you'll go through all of your hit rolls and wound rolls for that one attack pool. So you'll get all of the dice that are equal, and you'll put them all together in one pool, and then you roll it to hits, and you roll to wounds, and then you hand them to the other player. The other player then divides their unit by its defensive profiles, essentially save characteristics, and then you roll all the dice, and you apply them starting with the lower ones to the whatever save grouping that they put at the top of their sequence. It looks like critical hits and wounds rules are not changing. There are rolls to succeed or whatever. None of the core rules are changing, it looks like. Yeah. Then for saving throws, the defending player creates groups. They divide all models in the unit into the following groups as necessary. One group per character model. Oh, it's interesting. It's character model, not character unit. So in some cases, if you have like Aesrid Thurga and Agatha Dolan, I think, as an example of a 2-model character unit, where, if I remember correctly, I will fact check myself here. I don't believe that there is a cutout for the two individuals. So they are both each individually characters in a 2-model unit, which means they will both separately enter unique groups. They don't together form one group. They both go into 2 separate groups, which I guess makes sense because their save characteristics are different. So I don't know why I'm surprised by that, but it's interesting to note that that's the case. I'm sure there are other instances of that, and I just can't think of them off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are instances where there are like 2 models with identical save characteristics that are in a character unit. But I don't remember what it is. So here's the thing. You choose a group per other model sharing the same wound, save, and invulnerable save characteristic. This is section 503. What I would love to do is just verify, because that's a very important piece of knowledge. This is section 4. This is section 5. I imagine PV is the French abbreviation for wounds. What is wound in French? If we go from English to French, blessé, lifespan. Points of life. Oh, like point vitae maybe or something. Point vitae. Interesting. That's interesting. Okay, well, fair enough there, chat. Well, that's good. So it's good to clarify that wounds count actually separates you into a separate group. Because one big question we had was exactly how that worked, especially with things like Deathwatch Terminators. So Deathwatch Terminators like take shield guys for 4 wounds and also missile launcher guys for 3 wounds. And the fact that the wounds characteristic breaks them down into 2 separate defense groups means that you can apply your low save characteristics to your shield models first, or your low saving throws to your shield models first, so you can lose the shield guys before you lose heavy weapons, or vice versa, whichever one is more helpful for you. So you declare the order in which attacks will be allocated to the groups, applying all of the following. If a group other than characters contains a model that has already lost 1 or more wounds, it must be first. No character group may precede a non-character group in the allocation order. Characters always go to the end of the order, and then you sort them however you want. And then character groups that contain a model that has lost 1 or more wounds become before those that contain no wounded models. I fucking love this system, chat. I think it's really cool. I think it speeds up the gameplay and also gives the defending player a lot more interesting decision points. Over the course of an attack sequence. I think it's fucking super sick. And then the saving throws are applied from the lowest result to the highest. So the earliest group that you've set to your attack sequence, which is typically going to be your shitty idiots you don't care about, will be at the start of the sequence, and all your shitty results are going to be applied to them. It's also important to note that any specialists inside a single defensive group here are not picked out separately. And I imagine that the defender assigns the damage to someone of their choice. A non-modified 1 inflicts damage. The models in the current allocation group, blah blah. To modifying the save character save results with AP characteristic of the attack, it equals or exceeds the save characteristic of models in the current allocation group. It fails. Oh, here's an interesting thing too. So if you roll a 1, you automatically fail. If you roll... Okay, so the failure means that the attack fails in this case. This is a little bit confusing, actually. This sent me for a loop. So if you have an invulnerable save characteristic and you pass the invulnerable save, the attack is automatically blocked. So in the current and in basically all previous editions of 40k, they've said that if you have an invulnerable save and you have an armor save, you can choose which save characteristic to use. So in some cases, you can give yourself a worse saving characteristic if you want to take additional damage to change your board position. It looks like in 11th edition, that will no longer be the case. If you succeed, if the saving throw succeeds an invulnerable save that attack allocation group has, you automatically pass the save and you just end the attack sequence immediately. That's a big change, actually, for Harlequin players who would be like, I'll take 6 up armor saves and everyone will die so that you can't make a charge roll or anything. Though that's no longer the case. If you just make a saving throw and you succeed on your invuln save, you just succeeded. Then if at that point the roll has saved based on the normal save characteristic of your model, after it's been modified with AP characteristic, then you fail, otherwise you take damage. That's interesting and cool. In an Art of Warrior video, you decide the amount of dice each group gets. That is not correct. You basically you roll all of the dice together, and you basically assign saves down the chain, starting from the lowest. So let's say, can we clear this? Yeah. So let's say I have a bolter guy. Oh, hello. Can I go my pen? We'll do paint. We'll do paint hammer. So I have bolter guy. I have shield guy. He'll be green, and I have character. He'll be red. And I'm being attacked 3 times, and I roll, and I've decided to order bolter guy first, shield guy second, character guy third, because the character always has to go in the back. And I roll. Let's say that this guy has a 3+ save, this guy has a 4+ save, and this guy has a 4+ save. Right? So then I'm attacked some number of times. Let's say 5 times. And I roll a 1, a 2, a 4, 5, 6. I start at the low end. So I start by assigning the 1 to the first group. If that kills the whole first group, then the next one goes to the next group. But if the group is still alive, I assign the next one to them. So let's say this guy has 2 wounds and he saves on 3s. My lowest rolls start with a 1 and a 2. He's going to take both of those and he's going to be dead. Then I look at my next number and that gets assigned to the next group that I assign to. If it's a 4, I automatically pass if I have a 4+ invulnerable save, regardless of what else is going on in the whole game, which means this dude saves, and that's all you have to do. So basically, you have 2 choices. You can put your invulnerable saves first, in which case you'll eat more damage, but you have a better chance of saving the squishy guys because all of the high saving throws are going to go on them. However, they're going to take more of the 1s and 2s. Generally speaking, I think what you're going to do is you're going to put your shitty idiot stupid guys in the front that you don't care about, your like bolter dudes or your non-invuln save dudes. They're going to go in the front and they're going to eat all your low rolls until they're dead. That leaves the high rolls for the units with stronger defensive characteristics. I'll probably do. I was kind of waiting on confirmation for a lot of the weird little minutia in here, but I'll probably do a video like showcasing like I did with the combat movement rules I made this morning. I'll probably do a video showcasing the wound allocation system. I think I have a suspicion that people are going to be like, this is too complicated and I hate it, and then they're going to play one time with it and be like, oh, this actually rules. I think the wound allocation system is actually sick. Because there's going to be situations where you want to assign your invuln save guys first or your invuln save guys last. If you have higher wound count models, you could put them in the front of the wound allocation step, even if their save characteristics are better, which means they would take more damage from low rolls, but it means that they can absorb more of those hits before the saves go to like the rest of the unit. I think there's like a lot of interesting decision points. A lot of times it's going to be like the same save characteristic on a unit than a character, in which case it's just going to work exactly the same as the current edition does. However, I think it's interesting. The other thing too is that it requires, because wounds are relevant, it requires that if you have multiple wound characteristics inside a unit, that you always pre-declare the order in which they're taking saves. That's like an open question. It's literally not answered in the rules of 10th edition, whether or not something like an Orc Knob or an Eldar Exarch has to be pre-declared to take saves. The rule is you have to declare if the order in which saves are rolled would matter, which is fucking stupid. And does your wounds count matter? If the answer is yes, then I think all wound allocation matters and you can never fast roll dice ever. It's a huge like rules black hole. However, in this case, it's very clear. You have to tell your opponent whether or not you're taking your multi-wound models saves first or last before the 1 wound models in your unit. It's just, you just have to tell them immediately. If you're taking 2 hits from a melt, I put it on servitors. Otherwise, don't, because you lose all 3 since they're a group. I'm confused by that, but I'm sure you're right. Yeah, so Grimaldus, I believe, let's take a quick peek at Grimaldus. I believe that Grimaldus's servitors are non-characters. Oh, they are characters. Interesting. All right, so here's how it works with Grimaldus chats. You have your unit composition is yeah, there's nothing that says that the servitors are not characters. So assuming that the servitors are character models, which is what this implies, the way that it works is that you look at your unit and you go, all right, I'm in a Crusader squad, so I'm going to have 4 groups. We can even do this on our paint thing. I have 4 groups. I have neophytes. I have initiates. Or excuse me, I have more than 4 groups. I have 6 groups. And then I have, because the servitors are individual, I have servitor 1, 2, and 3, and then I have Grimaldus. The servitors, because they're characters, have to go in some sequence with Grimaldus. I don't think that there's any situation in which he wouldn't order the servitors first, but because they're individual character models, they each form their own group. You then choose what order in which you're going to take saves, whether it's going to be on the 4+ save neophytes or the 3+ save initiates. If you take the low saves first, you always take the low saves first. So a lot of times what you might want to do is put the saves on the initiates, because any 3s that you roll will save versus the neophytes, which will just eat the damage. However, initiates, if you save them for lower and you think your neophytes are all going to die, you can just eat the 1s and 2s and 3s on the neophytes, and then all the 5s and 6s will go in the initiates, which they will most likely save. It's up to you. Again, there's like a lot of interesting decision making. Once the last initiate dies, the first servitor takes the next hit. So any additional dice that you have remaining in that attack pool just start to go to your servitors until the servitors are dead. Then you hit Grimaldus. Do you still have to align to the same groups if one group is wounded? Yes. Yeah, if in any of these categories, character versus non-character, you have a wounded model, that group immediately bumps to the top. So if I had a wounded neophyte, for example, or a wounded initiate, for example, initiates would automatically pop to the top. And if for whatever reason Grimaldus was wounded, he would actually pop to the top of the character like subsection here. So if you had Grimaldus wounded, he could die and all the servitors would just be left without a guy, which in previous editions used to kill them. But I don't think it does anymore. I think you could just have servitors like in a unit just vibing. Which is very funny. That is very funny. I like that. Yeah, the precision. We'll look at exactly how precision works for sure. Hey, our super chat thing's working.
Bellamont donated $2 through super chat. How about Cadian command blobs? Save the medic last.
So that's a very different situation, because Cadian command squads, if we look, actually, I think you might be right. I was under the impression that Cadian command squads had a different breakout, but if they don't, then that's absolutely correct. You can just assign the medic last and then keep regenerating models. However, the thing to consider is that the medic in that case always absorbs your high saving throws if they get through the platoon commander. So if like your opponent's hitting you with AP2 weapons that would put him on a 7-up save that he can't pass, and the platoon commander dies to earlier saving throws, the medic will just immediately absorb it and die. Whereas if you put the platoon commander last, the unit would actually survive. And one dynamic I think we're going to see quite a bit in this edition, we've already seen it in every game that's been played, is that a character with an invulnerable save at the end of a unit is very difficult to kill in a single activation, because all of the low saves are automatically passed to the unit. It's not like effectively random like it is now. And so your character just absorbs like every single 4+ save on his invulnerable save as soon as the rest of the unit is dead. So if, like, let's say, for example, I have 3 infantry and the character, and my opponent hands me 6 wounds, and I roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the character has a 4+ invuln. The 1, 2, 3 kill the 3 mooks, and the character eats every single other hit and survives. But that is to say, Chant, that's a good call out, because assuming that the command squads keep all their character keywords, you would be able to slot the medic guardsman last if you wanted to do that. All right. Let's talk about inflicting damage, which is another thing that I didn't know how it worked, and so I'm very excited about it. First of all, you choose a model. You follow the sequence for your saving throw from the lowest result to the highest result until all attacks are resolved. Oh, we talked about this already. So you do this for each attack. If the attack inflicts damage, you go to the resolve damage step. The chosen model loses a number of wounds equal to the damage characteristic of the attack. If the attack reduces the remaining wounds of that model to 0 or less, it is destroyed. So I imagine that for random damage weapons, what you do is assign the damage. You no longer have to slow roll saves anymore, which is fucking awesome. You assign the save groups, and then you roll all your dice, and then you say one, and then you basically just go down the line and you slow roll the damage results on each individual if they have multi-wounds. So if I'm being attacked with like an intercessor squad and I've rolled a 1, 2, and 3, which would go through on my intercessors, and then a bunch of saves, the one, like I'd roll damage for the 1, and I'd roll damage for the 2, and then I roll damage for the 3, and we'll see if those in order kill any models, and then there's the potential that they kill through the remainder of that group, and then we determine where the rest of the attacks are going, onto which allocation group they're going to. The commander is the only one with a character. Okay. Well, I'm being lied to by 39k then, chat. The downside of using 39k as our reference guide here. This doesn't have a breakout for individual. I guess it, in theory, it tells what keywords each individual model has, but I guess it's not doing that. So, I don't know. If you have a multi-model character unit where all of the models are characters, each model would break out individually into a different category. If you have a character unit where there's only one character model, the remainder of those the non-character models would be assigned to whatever normal allocation group they would be in. So if these guys, for example, are non-characters and they're all 1 wound, T3, 5-up save, same invuln, they would go into the allocation group with all the other guardsmen. Yeah, Wahapedia honestly just crashes at this point. I don't really use it anymore, unfortunately. Yeah, so I apologize, chat. Obviously, like, I'm operating under the rules that I have in front of me, and if they're wrong, then it is what it is. I can only give you information based on the information that I myself have. So yeah, it is. I guess it would be the case if the servitors in Grimaldus' unit are non-characters, then they would be assigned to an additional allocation group. So you could, if you wanted to, put them at the front of the unit, for example. So you could take the hits on the servitors as a group by themselves at the front. If they are treated as characters, then they all go to individual groups, though, at the end of the sequence. Yeah, I think that's it. This is another wake-up call to not use 39k. I think that I ideally just have to construct a new system for rules reference, unfortunately. Not the first time I've been burned by 39k giving me incorrect rules. It is unfortunately a not perfect system. It was kind of the best we had, but I might be able to build some sort of emulator that can use other rules reference tools that I can add to my stream overlay. But I think it's going to take a lot of work on my end, so please bear with me for the time being. I don't want to have to use the app, chat. What's more full of errors, the actual GW app or 39k? Because I'm pretty sure the answer is not 39. All right, let's look at some other stuff. Visibility. I think this is they use the same diagrams, at least according to this, as they have in 10th edition, which means the visibility rules are likely not changing, which would make me very sad. When the dust has settled, the app is correct. I mean, I guess so. It just tends to release with like massive issues every time. Line of sight is used to determine visibility between models. For a model that is observing to have line of sight, it must be possible to draw a straight imaginary line from any part of the model to any part of the observed model. Cool. This is line of sight. Yeah, we hate this rule, but it is what it is. Unfortunate that it remains in this way. Mortal wounds. Each time a unit suffers one or more mortal wounds, the controlling player must resolve the sequence for each mortal wound until they have all been inflicted or until the unit has been destroyed. Choose a model from the unit according to the first applicable instruction below. If a non-character model in the unit has lost one or more wounds, you must choose that model. Otherwise, if it includes one or more non-character models, choose one of those models. Otherwise, if one or more character models have lost one or more wins, you must choose one of those models. Otherwise, you choose a character model. So it essentially works like normal wound allocation that we have in the current edition. It just has to be spelled out because it doesn't. We no longer use the same wound allocation rules as we do in 10th edition. Hazard rolls are the new thing. We've seen the rules for these before. On a 1 or a 2, every time you're called to make a hazard roll, which is now just a core mechanic and affects a lot of different interactions, you take 1 mortal wound unless you're a monster vehicle, in which case you take 3 mortal wounds. Interestingly, if every model is a monster vehicle.
Edriong 6931 donated $5 through Super
No,
Chat. GW, the app you opened IT. We came. Trevi.
Hilariously, G-Dub did give me codes for the codexes and stuff. So I don't really have an excuse not to use the app anymore, except that I would have to find a way to set it up on my computer, which I could do. It's just like the last time I used an emulator on my machine, it was a pain in the ass, and so I've been reticent to do it. But I think that's probably going to have to be the case moving forward. That's a good wake up call, I guess, Chance, that my rules reference might not have been correct. They did give me codes, chat. I'm part of the official tournament organizer program, which is very exciting. Yeah, I'm the biggest shill for sure. You can tell. All right, hazard rolls are good. I think they did. Did they talk about devastating wounds? Oh, they just mentioned it. But I'm sure the devastating wound rules will have specific ways to allocate devastating wounds for them. We talk about the battle round. I don't think anything here is necessarily different. At the end of the battle round, first resolve rules triggered at this stage. Then each player checks their mission. If they have completed one or more aspects of the mission, they're triggered at the end of the battle round. Resolve them. I don't know if any mission aspects trigger end of battle round. That's pretty weird. Player turn structure. It's the normal stuff. We can sort of go through a lot of this stuff. So in the battle shock step, I like that command points is like baked into the core of the command point. Well, there's a whole separate step for gaining command points, which is cool. Interestingly, this is a big difference. You battle shock first, then use command abilities. So that's a big change from the way the rules work currently. I think largely to make it so that units that are battle shocked become ineligible for during command phase stratagems. So you take a battle shock if you are currently battle shocked or if you're below half strength. If the battle shock is passed, you're good to go. Otherwise, you continue to be battle shocked. If you are then battle shocked, obviously you can't be targeted by stratagems, which is a big deal. You then move to end of command phase. Trigger rules resolved at this stage other than mission rules, then trigger mission rules, which I probably imagine includes level of control. But I guess we'll have to see if that gets defined anywhere. Also take that Necrons. That was already the case for Necrons. Necrons actually, if I remember correctly, they explicitly regenerated they regenerated at the end of the command phase, so it was sequenceable with level of control recalculation. So if you wanted to hold objectives with Necron units reanimating, you could, but it explicitly occurred after battle shock checks were taken. So it actually doesn't change the order at all. They basically just work exactly the same as they do now. What this doesn't say is whether there's a cap on command point generation, right? Gain base CP step guarantees both players gain 1 command point a turn. Rules that mention base CP when referring to these command points apply to them every time. The abbreviation kills me. Interesting. Yeah, but any other generation would not affect your capacity to battle shock. And also could potentially mean that you become ineligible to regenerate. So if you have something like Endless Swarm for Tyranids, where you regenerate guys for a command point during your command phase, it actually occurs after Battle Shock. So not only is there a greater chance that you do Battle Shock, but also there's a chance that you can't even be targeted by the stratagem. That's a big change as well. They've done a lot here to like really depower the reanimation style of gameplay, like the very static reanimation kind of plan where you just sit behind ruins and then you regenerate guys onto objectives every turn, which I think is good because that game plan is degenerate and stupid and I hate it. So, yay. Big stonks. All right, movement phase. You go to move units. First, you choose a unit. Choose a friendly unit that has not been chosen to move this phase. You maybe choose a unit on the battlefield in strategic reserve or embarkation of transports. This unit is now chosen to move. Oh, fascinating. Okay. So units in strategic reserve that are chosen to move then just perform an ingress move, right? Is that what it means? Choose a movement, the type this unit is eligible for, and resolve it. It can be any of the ones listed below or another presented elsewhere. Remain stationary, normal, advance, fallback, disembark, arrival move. Which I imagine is ingress move, right? That's supposed to be what that is? Maybe that's a little bit of a thing. So remain stationary just sits you down. Moves you the move characteristic of your unit, and you cannot be engaged or end engaged. Advanced moves an extra d6. You're not eligible to charge or perform an action. Your unit is eligible to shoot, but I think what they've done is reversed the requirements to make attacks, where you're always eligible to shoot, but never eligible to make attacks with non-assault weapons. There was always this like funny interaction, and I don't think it was ever fixed in 8th edition or maybe even 9th edition, where if you advanced, you couldn't fire assault weapons because you couldn't be chosen to shoot, which would then trigger the assault weapon rule. And I think they fixed that in 10th, but for like 4 years that like loophole was in the rules, and everyone just ignored it because like it was stupid. But it was just funny that like they had never fixed it really. But this makes a lot more sense. Arrival is just battle training translated ingress. Yeah, that's what I figured. Ingress is a kind of a weird rule, I guess. I like a weird terminology for the rule, so I understand that it's probably more closely translated to arrival from the raw French. Maximum distance. An advanced roll plus the moving characteristic of your unit. It's eligible if your unit is on the battlefield and not engaged. Yeah, we talked about advanced rolls. Fallback move works if you are engaged. You just move as described in the movement rule section. Normal stuff. You can either choose to either orderly retreat or desperate escape. If you desperate escape, everyone takes a hazardous roll. What's interesting is that vehicles desperate escaping will automatically take 3 mortal wounds on a failure and not die, which is very different. Your unit must not end engaged. So what you can't do anymore is fall back and desperate escape, and if you end with models in engagement range, they die. That's no longer the case. If you would end engaged, then I guess you have to choose a different kind of movement. But some rules ask that you choose a mode, such as fallback modes. Most are mutually exclusive, and you must evaluate each one in the order presented. When a unit performs a movement, your unit does not meet the conditions of any of these modes, it cannot perform that movement. Sometimes the mode is mandatory if applicable, like a consolidation move. But in the case of fallback moves, order retreat is not mandatory. You may choose to desperate escape instead. I kind of like these. Many movement mode types specify conditions that must be met while or after moving. Those that name a mode apply only if you choose that mode. Those that do not name a mode always apply. Okay. Interestingly, desperate escapes automatically force a battle shock check on you. However, you can move through enemy models. Here's a question that I have, which is that if after move conditions are not met, the unit cannot perform its movement and the models are returned to where they were before they began. Otherwise, after resolving the rules in the after moving section of the movement type, the movement is complete. So if I get like ringed, right? I'm just clouded by a bunch of enemies, and there's no physical way that I can end and I choose to make a fallback move. This is maybe a bit of a loophole, and it might need to get patched up. If there's no physical way for me to end not in engagement range of an enemy, which I think is going to be very relevant because engagement range is 2 inches now, so the bubble from enemy models is enormous. I then I can't perform the movement, so I return to the starting position. However, I doesn't necessarily say that I can then remain stationary. I think what we basically need is a clause that says if a movement can't be completed, the unit remains stationary instead. Because there's no case in which you can't remain stationary, right? You're just always eligible to remain stationary. So if I choose to make a fallback move and then I determine that I cannot legally fall back, it kind of seems like the game just blue screens. However, I think what it should say is that I reset to remain stationary, right? Because previously it was the case that if I tried to make a fallback move and I couldn't get out of engagement range, the extra models would die. So I would always end outside engagement. And sometimes that just meant the entire unit was killed. But it seems like that's not the case. I just can't end in engagement range. So it's not only reasonable, but likely that I find a situation in which a fallback move is literally uncompletable. And if that is the case, the game doesn't progress. There was an earlier paragraph about this. I thought that was the section that we just looked at previously. Did I just skip over it like a goober? I'm sorry for the scrolling chat. I guess this might be like a weird translation. I assume that this refers to setting up on the battlefield. So this is like what happens when you like try to set up when you try to like disembark a transport or like deep strike, but are fully screened out. But I wonder if this is actually a different term. If the actual final, this might be a translation error, where if the actual final verbiage is different than placing a unit. Yeah, that's okay. So I think I misinterpreted what this section was supposed to be about. I assumed that it was like that this covered setup, like setting up a unit on the battlefield. But if this describes what happens when a unit doesn't have space to fit after a movement, then it makes total sense. You return it to the previous position, and the unit, and you cannot be chosen to perform that movement. You can attempt a different movement. So you can try to like, if that's the case, then you bounce back to the original position, and then you just do a remain stationary, which makes total sense. That's how it should be. So okay, assuming that that's the case, this is great. No notes. We love that. Oh, is there a section about that I just missed that talks about legal moves? I just want to double check your chat, make sure I'm talking about this correctly. Engagement. Yeah, so like the difference between this and these two sections here, chat, is that this tells you go back to the original position, but it doesn't tell you to choose a different type of movement, right? So like if I attempt a movement, but the movement ends out of coherency, then I would bounce back to the original position and reattempt, which is how it currently works in 10th edition. However, there are few, if any, instances in 10th edition where I can attempt a movement and be physically unable to complete it. I don't think that can happen. Maybe there is. I don't know. But generally speaking, like if I return to my original position and then attempt to move it again, generally speaking, I will be able to complete it unless the result, like in some cases, the result is that I just don't move. Right? If I can't move anywhere, then I would just make a normal move of 0, for example. But it is very reasonable in this edition, according to the rules we're looking at, to attempt to perform a fallback move, but be physically unable to complete it legally. The assumption is that this section says that basically if that occurs, I bounce back to the original position and then I remain stationary. But this section doesn't say that I choose a different movement. Right? So I attempt to make a fallback move and I can't complete the fallback move, so I bounce back, but the position I've ended that fallback move in is illegal because I can't end engaged. So I attempt another fallback move, but if I'm clouded and I can't end a fallback move unengaged, I just keep attempting fallback moves until the sun explodes. Which I certainly don't think is the correct interpretation, right? So I assume that the section about placement says that if I can't complete that movement, I go and choose a different kind of movement. In which case, if I find I cannot fall back, I will choose to remain stationary. Which seems like the simple way to do it, right? That would be the easy way to do things. I would give the benefit of the doubt that that's exactly how it works. All right. Speaking of which, let's talk about shooting. We talked about shooting. We've sort of talked about all different kinds of. We talked about how shooting works initially. You choose a shooting type, either normal, assault, close combat, or indirect shooting. Normal shooting is normal. Assault shooting works if you advance moved and you only fire assault weapons. We love this. Close combat shooting, you fire close range weapons. I like that it correctly translates this. I guess an interesting thing, this is section 10.3, would be to compare the... Oh, did we get got by the gods above? No, we're still here. Would be to compare the terminology used in these two sections. The section that was fucking up pistols. It would be over here somewhere. 10, 9. No, this is just bouncing all over the place. These are all the types of movement. This is charge phase stuff, consolidation. Yeah, this is super unordered. Oh well, it is what it is. So I think we know all of the rules for this stuff. Close combat shooting, you get -1 to hit unless you have a close quarters weapon. A blast weapon can be fired into close quarters. Monster vehicles, non-monster vehicles can only shoot close quarter weapons and can only shoot the thing that they're engaged with, and that you can't perform actions. Indirect fire shooting shoots as described as performing attacks. You may target units not visible to the attacking model. I mean, close quarters and close range is when you're talking about a translation, might as well be the same. But the original, the term used earlier in the document, I will give the benefit of the doubt to translating close quarters and close range, mistranslating close quarters and close range, right? Because the difference is so minute. The earlier in the document they translated it as pistol, which is where do you find that? That's that's a totally different noun that describes an object, not a relation of two objects to one another. That's the funny part. It's not a perfect translation, but we understand what they're talking about versus with close quarters versus close range. Pistol is that's just old rules. That's just a hallucination. So this was a question that somebody had in the chat earlier today. At whether or not indirect fire shooting was considered snap fire. At least according to this, it's not. However, it does look like you lose the ability to reroll hit rolls. And I guess the thing to consider here is that when you can see your target, you're going to choose normal shooting, right? However, here's an interesting. Okay. The indirect shooting, like, you choose a shooting type for the entire unit, right? Yeah, choose a shooting type the unit is eligible for. You can target other visible targets with your weapons. However, the restriction of the hit roll on indirect fire weapons is not related to the use of indirect fire weapons to fire indirectly. So here's a weird thing that happens, right? Let's say we have according to these rules, of course, let's say that we have a unit of desolators with castle launchers and a Vinger launcher. We want to shoot the castle and launchers indirect fire at a unit that another friendly can see, right? So it's an indirect fire weapon that goes and hits on 4s into a unit that the attacking unit can't see but is visible to another friendly unit, which means we get the hit on 4s thing. The Wenger launcher and all of the missile launchers fire into an enemy that the entire Desolator unit has visibility to. The Wenger launcher hits on 4s because the Wenger launcher is both an indirect fire weapon and the unit is firing using the indirect fire shooting type. It doesn't say that when attacking with an indirect fire weapon, when you attack targets not visible to the attacking model, you hit on 4s. It just says that indirect fire weapons hit on 4s. Which is wild. Oh, interesting. But also, so here's another thing. You have to remain stationary, apparently, in order to get hitting on 4s. And the unit remains stationary, and the target is visible to one or more friendly units. Wow, indirect fire weapons are fucking super tough to use. Holy shit. So you have to stay still to not hit on 6s? Yikes, chat. That's wild. Indirect cannot reroll, because this says you cannot reroll your hit rolls. Also, it gives the benefit of cover to all targets of indirect fire weapons. This feels fucked. I hope this is mistranslated, chat. Because this feels actually fucked. So, like, let's say the other way around, right? I want to shoot my Vinger launcher at a unit that I have a spotter for, so I can see them. And I hit on, and I remain stationary, so I hit on 4s. But I want to shoot all my little castle launchers at somebody I can see. But the castle launchers will just hit on 4s, and they'll hit on 5s because they get the target gets cover, and it's unmodified. Just kidding. So it hits on 4s regardless. But either way, it just hits on 4s, and I can't reroll hits, even though I'm not using them to fire indirect. This could be translation. Yeah. I don't know if I want to parse through the entire document here to find the exact page it's coming from. I'd be interested to see the actual rule for this, because this does feel a little fucked, right? I think what it likely is supposed to say is that indirect fire weapons of your unit may target units that are not visible to the attacking model. If they do so, this applies, right? Because as it stands, splitting fire with indirect fire weapons is actually like super duper bad for you. It's just really weird. Like desolators especially, which have multiple indirect fire profiles on their guns, can like just get sort of like just super hosed by that mechanic, and it doesn't really make sense, right? It doesn't make sense for that mechanic to work that way. I don't understand why it would. Weird. Charge phase. During the charge phase, you're eligible to perform charges. Blah 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 blah. Without a modifier to the charge roll, a result of a 2 never allows you to complete a charge move. Shitty. The result of such a roll is therefore a failed charge, and the unit cannot move. We have talked about all of these mechanics before, but we haven't gotten the explicit text of them. Choose a friendly unit that has not yet declared a charge this phase and is eligible to declare a charge. See below. That means that you are within 12 inches of an enemy. You are not engaged, and you have not made an advance or fallback move. You then make a charge roll by rolling 2d6. That's your maximum distance. You then perform a charge move. You choose units. It should be in the charge movement here. You choose an enemy unit within 12 inches and within the maximum distance of your unit, which is the result that you rolled on your 2d6. You then attempt a charge move, which means that you move closer to the charge target within 1 inch if you can, and engaged if otherwise you cannot move within an inch. You must be engaged with all of the targets that you selected, and you cannot engage any new enemy units, which does get a little bit tough with the 2-inch engagement range, but it's not the end of the world. Then you gain fight first. If you cannot charge, then you make no charge move. Or if you choose not to target a unit. Neat. Yeah, +1 would allow you to succeed on a snake eyes. But if you have charge bonuses, charge bonus stonks up because like charges are much less consistent now. Making the charge is a little bit better, but charges are much less consistent. I'm a little worried about a couple archetypes of units, and one of them is like relatively slow, large base melee units. I think they actually might just be dead. If you're like a move 5 50 mil base melee unit, like a mutilator or something, I think you actually are just an unplayable piece of shit because you don't have base to base engagement. I guess for a 50 mil base to base would allow you to engage. So I guess that's not the best example with like a 2 model unit. But if you have multiple models, if you're several models in 50 mils, you're going to get a couple of models into the fight, but then you're going to get like 3 models into the fight, but then no more. I think it's going to be problematic. If remaining stationary is one of the movement options that can trigger rules like Overwatch or reactive move. No, I believe that Overwatch I believe that Overwatch or that remaining stationary explicitly does not trigger effects. That's like the benefit of remaining stationary is that you don't get hit by stuff. It's in the movement section. Units remain stationary do not trigger any rule triggered when a unit begins or ends in movement. It's the effect of remaining stationary, which is nice. All right. We talked about charges. We talked about we're in fight phase. Both players perform insertion moves. Insertion moves. I think that means pile in moves, most likely. That sounds like a very interesting translation error. We have all the rules for these already. You either, if you're engaged, then you target with a pile-in move the enemies. I have a video about this. Whatever. You can watch my video about how this works. I'm not going to go into it right now. I did a whole video about how this facility is supposed to move. Fighting. A unit is eligible to fight if it has not already chosen to fight this phase, and if one or more following apply. It is engaged or is engaged at the start of the step. It made a charge move this turn. Starting the player's turn, it is by a shake chance for choosing a friendly unit that has the fight, the combat first ability, the fight first ability, and is eligible to fight is then chosen. If it's not possible, if there's no units remaining with the combat first ability eligible to fight, or move on to remaining combats, where that player will then choose their next unit. Oh, interesting. Starting with the player whose turn it is, players take turns choosing a friendly unit that has the fight first ability and is eligible to fight. That unit is chosen to fight. If this is not possible, if there are no remaining units with the fight first ability eligible to fight, move on to the resolve remaining combat step, where this player will choose their next unit. The first player? I imagine it means the first player, actually. The active player, sorry. I thought for a second it said that if you pass back and forth for fights first, and then when you have no more models left, if you are the player whose turn within the fight phase it currently is, they then choose the thing. So you never get double fought, but I don't think that's actually what it's saying. And that again could be a weird translation thing. I thought for a second that it was kind of neat, but it actually wasn't. It was super lame. I do think that the inability to choose both fight firsts and ongoing combats for the inactive player is going to make the fight phase very one-sided in either direction. Like it's very easy to have a unit double fight into somebody and kill them, right? Which is not ideal. Starting with the player who moved to this sequence at this step, players take turns choosing a friendly unit to eligible to fight. That unit is chosen to fight if this is not possible. The fight phase ends, otherwise the other player chooses the remaining unit. Yeah. All charging units get fight first. Fights begin with fight last. You never fight twice unless you have fight first left and your opponent doesn't. Right. But if you have both fight first, if it's your turn and you both have fight first and ongoing combats, you get first swing on both, right? The active player does not always fight first in remaining combats. I am not sure if that is the case. I don't disbelieve you though, because I think that would be neat. However, that is I don't think explicitly what this says, right? They said it during the Q&A? Okay. Well then, I missed it if they said that. I think I'm going to wait for the actual verbiage from this rule, because this is a very confusing way to word this. So it's like, the players take turns choosing a friendly unit in the combat and is eligible to fight. That unit is chosen to fight. If this is not possible, if it's not possible to take turns, is what it's saying, then this player chooses their next unit, which I think the previous like reference this is referencing to is the player's turn it is, right? Which it sounds like is not the intention. I think this is just fucked. This verbiage is just fucked. So I'm gonna wait to see the actual rule. I don't think that this is the actual verbiage of the rule. If that is the case, then I like this rule. Otherwise, I do think it's a little silly. But it's much cleaner if you just go back and forth, and then whoever didn't go last goes first in the next activation. Because I think that makes a lot more sense, right? That's a lot more egalitarian in terms of the resolution. If I fight first a million times, then you should get first ongoing. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm gonna take your word for it, chat. That doesn't seem to be the way. I don't know. This rule is worded very confusingly, but I assume that that's because this isn't the actual rules text. When a unit is chosen to fight, each time a unit is chosen to fight, choose a combat type it is eligible for and resolve it. It can be one of those listed below or another presented elsewhere. It's a normal combat if your unit is engaged. It's an outflanking combat If your unit is not engaged or was not engaged at the start of the fight but became engaged during the fight, you make one additional pile-in move. Oh, interesting. Your unit is not engaged or was not engaged at the start of the fight phase but became engaged during the combat phase. This is almost certainly fucked, right? You are eligible if your unit is not engaged. Oh, I guess, but became engaged during the combat phase. So if you touch someone and then leave engagement with them, they still get to swing at you? Huh. Well, that's interesting. What? That's fascinating. Okay. And then you make an additional pile-in move. So this was an open question that I had because the consolidation rules that said that your opponent, as soon as you consolidate to a new unit that hadn't fought yet, your opponent immediately fights, did not specify whether or not you made an insertion move, a pile-in move. So it's good that I guess there's confirmation that you do so. Neat. We love that. What is interesting is that it's never specified, and I think that this does indicate. So my video this morning might have a little bit of an error. I think I had an open question in it, but that hadn't been answered. There is no core rule that says that anytime you end a movement, you don't end engaged. Movements definitionally can end engaged with an enemy unless it explicitly says otherwise. Pile-in moves can engage new enemies. Because it doesn't say they can't. It just says you move towards the closest pile-in target. Engaged with it if possible. But it does not say that you can engage new enemies. Or you can't engage new enemies. And that is also the case of the original thing. So what you could do is you could engage an enemy, pile in towards it, but like combat orbit essentially, to tag new enemy units. Now, I don't know if there is a restriction on like who you can target with the attacks. And it doesn't seem to have any specific requirements. So piling in just allows you to pile into new enemies, but you don't go towards them. I am going to I'm going to I don't think I like this, honestly. I really, the rules say you don't pile into units. No. It doesn't say you. It says you don't. These rules are the same as the ones we have. I even have them saved on my hard drive because I literally just made a video about this. It says that you don't move. You move towards units that you are currently engaged with, right? What it doesn't say is that you cannot engage new enemies, right? You are eligible to pile in if you engaged or made a charge move or have made an overrun fight. You select pile in targets, which if you are engaged is the units you're engaged with. Otherwise, it's enemies within 5. You move. You can't move them within move models that are in base contact. You move closer to the closest pile in target and engage with that target if possible. Your after moving unit must be engaged. If you started the move engaged with the enemy unit, you must still be engaged with that enemy unit. And I explained why that is the case in my video this morning. It means you can't have two models equidistantly, or two units equidistant to you and pile out of engagement with one of them and into engagement with another one, which was a thing in 9th edition. That was a big piece of technology where you could engage someone and hit them and then pile out of melee into a second enemy unit. They've specified you can't do that. What this in no way says is that you cannot engage a new enemy. Yeah, the charge move stops you from dragging new units in, and the consolidation I think allows you to, but it's like it's more confusing because you, yeah, the consolidation is basically the same as the pile-in move. You just can't move out of people unless you are unengaged when you consolidate, and then you do an engaging consolidation, in which case you go to engage new enemies. That one explicitly like basically requires you to go touch other units. So so I actually hate this rule, chat. And the reason I hate this rule is that how can you pile into a new enemy if it can't be legally declared as a pile in target? Because it is possible, chat. Bear with me here, to move towards an enemy unit, or to move within 2 inches of a unit while moving towards a different unit. So let's say we'll go back to our MS Paint. It's MS Paint time. Here is my piling in units. They will be red because they have charged. I have a model who is piling in, plus a couple of models who are engaged, having successfully charged, right? My target is here. So these guys charged. Okay, I can just do text. So these guys charged. Because that's really small. It is, but we're going to bear with it. These guys are the pile in target. Oh god, what just happened? Pile in target. However, there is another dastardly model who I did not declare as a charge target, and who's like over here somewhere. Right? Distances, I don't know. Don't worry about the distances. My guy in the back, this guy, can go like this. He moves closer to these guys. He probably can't end an engagement range of them because he's really far away. However, in his new position, he will be engaging this guy, and then can punch him with his attacks and kill him. I think this rule is bad. I think this rule is bad and dumb, and I hate it. So it basically works like if I have charged and I've strung my unit, which I can really easily do by moving the back of my unit like 2 inches so that the front of the unit gets leashed by the 9-inch coherency bubble, right? So like the front of this unit has to stay within a certain radius of this model. If this model can't move to engagement range or 1 inch of the charge target, I can move it like 0.01 inch, and it leashes the entire unit back towards it, and then that allows this unit to just slingshot into a unit I didn't declare as a charge target. I think this rule's stupid. So slingshot, yeah, very well maybe still a thing. God, I fucking hate this game. I was so ready to like this edition, chat. I was so ready. I was like, the combat movement is so smooth. There's so much less stupid bullshit that incentivizes you to artificially block your own charge range. Now I could just do that? Go fuck yourself, game. God damn it. That's stupid. I hate that. That makes me sad. That makes me sad and angry. In this scenario, you can charge both units if you roll high enough on your charge, so you can pull this maneuver off, but it's reliant on the charge. So it it still allows you to basically move like get the extra 3 inches from piling in, essentially, in some cases. Essentially, if I have models in my unit that I could move to, that I don't have to move within 1 inch of the enemy, which is really easy to engineer, right? You just like body block off the zone where I could engage, and then I like use those guys to leash back my coherency by moving them in a different direction. I can then use the pile and move for extra movement into a new direction. It's also a reason that they really need to resolve this issue with the coherency, because if you don't need the 2x2 coherency chain, these moves become infinitely stupider. I will say, I don't think it's as bad of a problem as it was in 10th edition, but I still don't like that it's possible. Because I do think that the 10th edition combat rules were just the worst that the game's ever had. They were fucking atrociously written. These combat rules are slightly better, but I don't like that there is still like the echo of like, you know, coherency engineering in order to allow pile-in moves. You must end within 1 inch if you can. But just like in 10th edition, that checks each time you move the model. So if I say, like, let's say I'm charging, we'll do the thing. So like my red unit is charging, and red unit rolled enough for the front guy to get within an inch of the charge target, but not enough for the back guy to get within 2 inches. There is still a requirement that I have to end the move engaged. So the loophole that we had in 10th edition, where if you rolled enough to not engage with your movement, but still successfully make the charge, you actually could just move anywhere you wanted, which was really stupid. If I don't have enough, if I didn't roll a high enough charge for this guy to go into this bubble, then this guy just has to go towards the charge target and end in coherency. So what I could do is basically do the same thing that I did in 10th edition, where I move that guy like 0.01 inches towards the charge target, and now the guys in the front of my unit are artificially constrained by his coherency. So either the 2x2 or the 9-inch bubble can potentially leash back the front of my unit and force them to end farther away from this model than they started, which could allow future models in this model's unit to go in new directions, right? I don't like it. I don't like it very much. Like I said, it's not quite as abusive as the 10th edition rules, but it's like, and it's like 75% of the 10th edition rules. With new charge rules, you could engineer really bad charges for your opponent by positioning 2 units right next to each other. So if you engage one, you'd have to engage the other. Yeah, but then they would just charge both, right? Like they could just declare both if they wanted to. I think that people are like, a lot of people are opening up like these like weird like defensive positions where like, well, if I intersperse my units in such a way, I could engineer a situation where like your charge is weird. And I think in a lot of cases the answer is like, no, I don't think it really works that way. And then also they're just going to shoot one of the units. If you're like, yes, I've perfectly created an interlock of multiple units. They're like, my Gladiator Reaper kills that unit, and you're like, all right, well now I only have one and it's a normal charge anyway, so like whatever. I don't think that those like situations defensively, the defender has a lot less to say in this whole interaction than the attacker does. They could add a line that says you have to move models that can make invasion range first. Yes. I think that would probably make sense. I think that like you are at the stage where I think that's pretty reasonable. Man, I was sure, chat. I was so sure that pilot moves would not be allowed to engage novel enemies that were not declared as a target. Fuck. But it doesn't say that. What a fucking dumpster fire. All right. Well, we're back to 15-minute fight phases where everything's stupid. I'm excited for that. Oh boy. Oof. All right. So then we go to fighting. Then we go to consolidation, which I have a whole video about, which I think is neat. I like the consolidation rules. And then terrain. I think a lot of this stuff is like sort of weird bullshit.
At the first Keeper of Secrets donated $2 through Super Chat. How are my mono/demons looking with these?
I don't, I guess like, I think a little bit better than like you probably would be in 10th edition. The benefit of cover onto invuln save protected stuff is a big deal. Like previously, none of the whole demon faction didn't get cover essentially, but now they do, so that's great. I also think that there is some interesting stuff where the one thing that is, I think, very important to note is that because the defender performs all of their pile-in moves before the attacker gets to attack, you have more chances to like be effect, I guess, like to like influence the board state with pile-ins than you did previously. Because like previously, the attacker would charge move, pile in, fight, consolidate before your unit did anything. But because your unit now piles in before they do, you can pin their consolidation moves if you don't die. So like weird instances like heroic interventions and like light infantry like interspersing inside of a unit. You know, some of the stuff that we're talking about with combat movement can be like you can unlock heroic interventions that your opponent can try to like pin you in place with charge moves. And I do think a lot of the like weird minutia of combat movement that sometimes Slaanesh demons can do is going to be helpful. That's true of a lot of different factions, but Slaanesh demons do tend to do a lot of that stuff. Don't see how GW thought giving everything towering was such a good idea. So so like it's just the 9th edition rules, chat. The funny part is that like 10th edition used the wholly within rule for line of sight for literally one edition. And then it was like, well, we're going to revert back to the old version. And now everyone's like, what the fuck? This is crazy. How could you ever do this? Like 40k was worse than this for a long time. Having Ruins block line of sight at all is better than it has been for multiple editions. But it's a lot easier to play out on the table. The within versus wholly within like version. All right, terrain features. Let's talk about terrain categories. There are open terrain, which can be traversed without hindrance. Okay, so it's just like they basically just block final positioning on movement. There's light terrain, which are barricades, low walls, and statues. It provides cover against attacks. There's dense terrain, which is an obstacle for war machines, but can shelter units. Oh, okay. These don't. These are just descriptors, which we shouldn't be paying attention much to these. I thought those were rules, and I was like, okay. It doesn't say anything. So terrain and movement, open and light terrain. You can move horizontally and vertically through light terrain features. Dense terrain, infantry, swarm, beasts, mobile. Can move horizontally through dense terrain features. Infantry, beasts, swarm may move vertically through dense terrain features. All other models may move horizontally through dense terrain features, provided all sections of the terrain feature through which the model are moving. Oh, that's good. Hey, not the total height of the terrain feature like it was previously. It was a total shit show. Are 2 inches or less in height. Otherwise, the moving model must move vertically to ascend or descend such sections. It cannot move through ceilings and floors while doing so, and it cannot end this move at any surface of the terrain feature that is not at ground level. You can only engage new units, or if you are not engaged. It literally please tell me where it says that. If you can tell me where it says that when you pile in, you cannot engage a new enemy unit if you are not engaged, I will give you a pat on the back and I will cheer. But as we're just talking about, I cannot find where it says that at all. That's the problem. Wonder how consolidation and overrun moves will work with things like a 6-inch pilot consolidate. I think that the timing of those are going to change. They'll probably change to working in like the pile-in stuff. Yeah, send it to me on Discord. Send me on Discord. I would love to see. If it's a rule that's like not included in this for sure. And maybe I'm just being stupid, but to my reading, nowhere does it say that a pilot move cannot engage a new enemy unit. I'll even open up my Discord. Let's see. Placing terrain. Oh, yeah, we don't need all this stuff. We already looked at this. Terrain and visibility. Okay, so there's a thing on vertical movement. Models may move vertically to ascend or descend terrain. When doing so, you must remain within 1/2 inch or less horizontally of the terrain. Oh, okay. So there's like a little buffer zone of the edge of the terrain to go up or down. That's cool. You don't have to necessarily be right up against it. May be placed or end a terrain on the ground level of the battlefield. You may also be placed or end a movement on any surface terrain feature that is not at ground level if all the following conditions are met. You are infantry, beast, swarm, fly, or monster? Huh. That model is stable, and no part of its base extends beyond the outer edge of that surface. We love that. Monsters can climb buildings and stand at the top? Wait, that's sick. Does that work very often? Solid terrain. If a terrain feature has the solid rule, like dense terrain features, a model cannot end any movement so that any of its parts pass through any part of the terrain feature that is 3 inches or less from ground level. Not even small openings, doors, or windows. This prevents the precisions of models from being able to circumvent visibility restrictions from the solid rule. Yeah, the solid rule is they showcased the diagram for solid, which is basically the first floor line of sight blocking rule from like OG ITC, basically. And they just codified that as a terrain rule, which I think is awesome. The benefit of cover. If you are infantry, beast, or swarm, let's see. For each shooting attack targeting unit, if each model in the unit meets one or more of the following conditions, the unit has the benefit of cover against that attack. The model has the infantry, beast, or swarm keyword and is in a terrain area. The model is not entirely visible to the attacking model due to one or more interposing terrain features, and or one or more interposing obscuring area or obscuring terrain zones. So that's if you are behind the terrain but not within it, and like the 3-dimensional, like the vertical area of the terrain is behind the basically infinitely tall like line of sight blocking area of the terrain, or if you're inside the terrain and you are standing close to it. So this also is interesting because what they didn't talk about previously and was implied but not stated was that they basically said multiple times vehicles and monsters will gain cover by being partially behind a terrain feature. What they never said was that infantry, beasts, or swarm also do that, which was the implication but never explicitly stated. That is in fact the case. So you can have an infantry unit that is half touching the terrain area and half behind the terrain area, and they will still gain cover, which is good. However, it is important to note that it's a requirement that every model in the unit meets one of the conditions, which means that if you have one model in your infantry unit that's fully visible to the attacker, you do not gain cover. So it's basically the exact opposite of the previous edition, where each model would gain cover and would essentially gain cover unless you ignored it. Now it's that you only gain cover if everyone has it. Magnus with 1 feather behind a ruin is -1 ballistic scale? Yes, indeed. You are hidden as long as the following are true. You are infantry, beast, or swarm, and you are inside terrain containing one or more of the dense terrain features. So it might not work on light terrain. Oh, I guess they have like clarified that sometimes terrain will have one dense object and the rest of the terrain will be light, in which case it would be eligible for hidden. That's interesting. You haven't made any shooting attacks in the previous turn, and your detection range becomes 15. It is only visible to enemy models within its detection range. Interesting. So here's what they don't say, is that you can't set up on the battlefield that turn. So it seems to me, and we'll see how the like ingress rules work, because we haven't gotten there yet, but it seems to me that there is the potential that you can rapid ingress into terrain and be out of visibility. thanks to hidden mechanics, which would be pretty wild. Terrain zones containing one or more light terrain or dense terrain features are obscuring terrain if all lines drawn between two models cross one or more obscuring terrain zones, either other than obscuring terrain zones in which one or more of those models are located. In those two models are not visible to each other. Huh. I wonder if I guess it's lines drawn between the models, which I guess implies that like it's not a line drawn over something else. I was like, what if I have line of sight, but there's an intervening model that blocks my true line of sight, but I have true line of sight except for obscuring otherwise? Does that count? I imagine the answer is yes, but I don't actually know. Solid terrain is the stuff we talked about earlier. We've already seen the thing. Buildings, doors, windows, holes, or small gaps between adjacent terrain features are essentially considered line of sight blocking. Models are not visible as long as they're sheltering behind terrain at the ground level. Love it. We love it. Pile-in stuff is in my general chat. I'm not sure where I'm looking here, chat. Sent me a DM. Right. So you sent me the pile-in thing. We're gonna go back and make sure I have this correct. Right? So you select pile-in targets. Right? So I select pile-in targets. If I'm engaged, I select the enemy unit that I'm engaged with, right? Then I move towards the pile-in target. Please tell me where in this section it says that I cannot move into engagement range with another enemy unit that's not my pile-in target. The only thing that it says about pile-in targets is that I move towards them. And obviously, if I can engage them, I must. But if moving towards my pile-in target brings me into engagement range with another enemy, that's legal. Right? Am I crazy? Am I an insane crazy person? I don't think I am. I think that I have this correct. The same way that we talked about here, right? So like if I have two enemy units, if I have like a red enemy unit and a blue enemy unit, and I'm piling in towards red because I'm engaged with them, but in doing so, I go here, and now I'm engaged with both. That's legal. Right? Am I an insane person? Oh, the Warcom article even says that? I thought the Warcom article actually said a different thing, but I was questioning myself on this earlier, and I just assumed that it didn't work this way, but these rules are certainly indicating to me that you can do this, which makes me sad. I'm not actually seeing the... Oh, piling. I looked up pile. Ah, look at that. They even explicitly say you can do that. I missed this, chat. I totally missed this. I thought... So there's a clause in here that says, like, because I read through this exhaustively last night. There's a clause in here that says, like, generally the only way to get into melee is to charge. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I basically don't have to worry about piling into new enemies because, like, I generally can only charge. I did not read the asterisk, which I should have, because it does confirm my fears that you can pile into new enemies. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right, chat. Well, I appreciate you sending me the article link, because I think that does confirm what I'm talking about here. Yeah. But that's I was operating under the hopeful assumption that there was a rule somewhere in the core rules that prevented that from happening. In fairness, I shouldn't have done that, because I wasn't aware that they had specified that you could engage new enemies with piling in. I am now significantly less excited about these fight phase rules, because I'm so excited for someone to spend 15 minutes very carefully blocking off all of their coherency and making sure no one can get within an inch of me, so that then they can go slightly farther to the left, and then they can engage a new enemy unit. Oh, fun. What a fun time we're all going to have while I sit there, like, twiddling my thumbs and jerking off and watching my opponent have a 10-minute combat interaction to, like, get another guy into an objective. Fucking so dumb. This game makes me sad sometimes. Oof. Anyway. Level of control stuff. Let's go. Imagine somebody playing with 90 by 52s, and, like, they're spinning them. They're like, I can move 3, and they're just, like, whirligig around, and they're like, I engage everyone now. And you're like, fucking okay, man. Oh, God, dude. Yeah. Playing knights. I do think, like, single entity units actually like the pilot move rules a lot better. I am very excited to play a lot of the single entity stuff, because previously you would charge and then immediately base, and unlike multi-model units where you would charge and then base a couple times and then the rest of your unit would string, you could never you basically never ever got any movement in the pile in or consolidate step unless you killed your target. Now you could construct a situation where you always get movement in the pile in and consolidate step. If you dual charge an enemy unit, for example, and you base them with one target, and then you have a single entity charge to an inch, then they get to pile in, then you get to fight, then they get to consolidate, and you can swing them all the way around their base. Fucking awesome. I'm excited about that. I think that's cool. Because I don't like big units and they make me sad. Why just myself? Because my opponent doesn't deserve the attention, chat. If my opponent's trying to combat slingshot 7 guardsmen onto my home objective, they don't deserve the extra effort, you know? That's all for me. Let's talk about level of control. To take control of an objective, a player needs to have one or more models with an OC characteristic of one or more within range of it. Model within range of an objective is within range of a terrain objective as long as it is in that terrain zone. At the end of each phase and each turn, to determine a player's level of control over an objective, add the OC characteristics of models in the player's army that are within range. The player with the highest level of control controls it. If both players have the same level of control over that objective, unless the objective is secured, neither player controls it. Love it. Some rules allow an objective to be secured by a player's army. When an objective is secured by a player's army, that objective remains under their control, even when there are no longer any units within range of it, until the opposing player's LOC is higher. Yeah, I do like that this is a core rule, by the way, and it's not a weird big data sheet rule. Stratagems. Stratagems describe how many command points they cost, when they can be used, which things they target, effects, and restrictions. Each player can use the same stratagem multiple times during the battle, but the following restrictions apply. You cannot use the same stratagem more than once per phase. Unless otherwise specified, you cannot target the same unit with more than one stratagem in the same phase. I'm sure they're going to release characters or something that let you, like, target multiple stratagems onto them. Each time you use a stratagem, resolve the following sequence. Choose the targets described. Oh, I love this, dude. Oh, this is so good. They never had this in 10th edition, and it created so many weird corner cases. There were, like, interactions that just had no answer. This is awesome. Choose targets described by the stratagem. Reduce your CP total by the cost listed in the stratagem. If the stratagem contains a section that implies an additional cost, for example, +1 command point, or yield points, for example. You can use that section only if you increase the cost of the stratagem by the indicated amount. If you do not have enough command points remaining, you cannot use the stratagem. Then resolve the effects of the stratagem. So I choose targets. Then at that point, if you have something that's like when you target somebody within a particular area of the battlefield, increase or decrease the cost of the stratagem by 1. I imagine that you go to start of section 2, recalculate cost, and then deduct cost from your total. Oh, gorgeous. Gorgeous. We love that. There are core stratagems. I think that we know most of the core strat stuff. I would be surprised if there are any particular things that we would learn from this, so I'm just going to skip over it. Actions. Actions that players can use are found in other publications. Yeah, I don't super love that like there are no missions in the core roles, but I get that they do like to switch them up. It's just sad to me that like I don't know, they don't lock in an action system and or a mission structure. And the annoying part is that means the mission structures always have very minor differences between like seasons, which is very annoying to keep track of. But that's neither here nor there. You cannot perform an action if you are an Aerodyne. Good stuff. I think it doesn't seem to me like any of the actions are different, right? Titanic units can perform actions while engaged. This doesn't imply that they require characters. So like currently you could shoot and perform actions while you're engaged, or you could shoot and perform actions, or engage in perform actions, and potentially while you are a character Titanic. This just says Titanic, so I think that's an improvement for Titanic units, assuming that is not a mistranslation, of course. Monsters and vehicles. So there was the question we had way at the beginning of the video. It doesn't say that you can't move through friendly monsters or vehicles. However, this section describes how you use them. Each time you perform a normal move or an advance of the unit, the monster vehicle models of that unit may move through friendly or enemy models, except other monsters or monsters and vehicles. Nice. I like that there's a whole section that describes how the keyword works. It'd be funny if they translated it just to Harry Dan. all other aircraft perform actions, but Harry Dan deserves to perform actions. Not only is he Titanic, but he's also full of character. He should be able to perform actions and still shoot. Some models have no base. A number of these are monster vehicles. If models have the chassis keyword, this might be moved to hull or retranslated to hull. We'll see. These models have the probably hull keyword. Each time a roll refers to a model's position relative to anything else in the battlefield, e.g. when measuring distances. If the model has the probably hull, I like chassis. Chassis is cool. If you have the chassis keyword, measure to and from the nearest point of that model, so not necessarily from its base if it has one. When pivoting a chassis model as part of movement, if the model has no base, pivot it in any direction around its central axis, keeping it upright. Nothing about line of sight or anything, so you can still just like spin your guys around the most advantageous way for cover or whatever, which is like not ideal. Shooting at engaged monsters and vehicles. Units that are engaged would be chosen as target of shooting attacks. You get -1 to hits, except for attacks made with close range weapons, close quarters weapons. Whole section on transports here, Chance. You have a transport capacity. It determines the type and maximum number of friendly models that are eligible to embark in them. Multiple units can be embarked in the same transport at the same time, as long as the transport capacity is sufficient. Before the battle, at the declared battle formation steps, units may begin embarked in friendly transports. I wonder if there's anything about dedicated. When you embark in a transport, each model in the units, when you end a normal advanced or fallback move, each model in the unit is within 3 inches of the transport. The unit was not placed on the battlefield this turn. Oh, that's interesting. So they closed the funny loophole where you could like deep strike Inceptors and then rapid embark them into Land Raiders. Interesting, chance. The unit is eligible to embark in the transport as described in the transport's datasheets. And if there is sufficient space in the transport for each unit, you're then removed from the battlefield. You are not embarked in the transport and no longer on the battlefield. You can disembark by performing a disembark move. So this is a special type of movement. So because you're eligible to be selected to move while you're embarked in transports now, you basically go, here's my here's my like movement activation. I perform a disembark move. So you can make a quick disembark within 3 inches. As long as the transport has not made an advance or fallback move, and you have not embarked in the same turn, and you are currently embarked, which makes sense. It'd be weird if I could choose disembark moves if I was outside of a transport. Can Asmund embark after he disembarks and shoots? Yeah. So you can re-embark. Oh, actually, maybe not. I would assume no, actually. I think they this is a thing where the placement rules are translated like super badly, and there's like a bunch of verbiage that is kind of weird. I would say this implies that you can't, but I would wait to see the full rules. So this says you can embark if you weren't placed on the battlefield this turn, which I think is like the translation of the setup on the battlefield rule. Which means that if you disembark a transport, you then cannot embark because you have set up, right? Because disembarking places you on the battlefield. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case. This is like the grain of salt of these like weird hokey translations, but it does seem to imply to me that you cannot both disembark and then re-embark at the same time. F. Azerman, R.I.P. So if a stratagem allows you to embark even though you disembarked, if it, I mean, specific overrides general. So if you have a thing that it specifically says you can embark even though you have disembarked, it would almost certainly override. But if you have a thing that says like you can embark, that would not override the normal restrictions. It would have to specify the restrictions that you get to ignore. That's actually a massive change. That's like super big. Will its ability override the no re-embarking? Specific datasheet stuff is almost certainly going to change. Yeah. I wouldn't. So like, I mean, a couple caveats, right? The first one being this rule might be mistranslated. The second one being this datasheet will almost certainly be rewritten. Because so many of the abilities in a lot of factions are incompatible with the current with these new rules, I would not assume that these abilities remain exactly the same. So I think rules as written, it seems like you can't, but maybe. Armored Spirits at Rapid Embark. It feels explicit to me that this is like meant to stop the armor, the disembark into re-embark. So like in Firestorm Assault, it explicitly says within the stratagem that you can't re-embark a transport if you disembark a transport in the same turn. It feels to me like this is like the rule essentially makes this work exactly the same way. So because like you have already disembarked, you're not able to embark a transport. So using a stratagem doesn't do anything on you. But again, like that could just obviously be a hokey translation. So we'll see. Mm, mm, mm. So you choose a disembarkation mode, either the quick disembark. If you made a normal or a rifle ingress move this phase, you choose the quick disembark mode. Tactical disembark. If the transport remains stationary or has not yet moved, you choose the tactical disembark mode. Otherwise, you choose a combat disembark mode, in which case you choose a hazard thing. Interesting. So I believe combat disembarkation is the mechanic, and we saw this breakdown earlier. I believe the combat disembarkation mechanic it basically is the version for when your transport's destroyed, because at no point at which you are unlikely to have made one of these, or like to fulfill the requirements for one of these if you're being killed on your opponent's shooting phase, for example. It does seem to imply, though, that if you choose to make a normal if you choose to make a normal move with the transport is destroyed by Overwatch, you just get to make a tactical disembark. Or a quick disembark, excuse me, which is very funny. Quick disembarkation, you are not eligible to declare a charge. Tactical disembarkation, you make a normal or advanced move. Combat disembarkation, you are battle shocked and not eligible to charge. And the cool thing with combat disembarkation is that you can be placed engaging an enemy unit that the transport is currently engaged with. The other thing is that emergency disembarks. So emergency disembarks is a 6-inch place distance that occurs when your unit is embarked to the transport that's been destroyed. Okay, so combat disembark is not the case for emergency disembarks. So at what point would you make a combat disembark? You can't make any disembarkation moves if the transport advanced or fell back. If the transport remained stationary or made a normal move, you make a normal thing. If you plan on shooting, changing the 3-inch rule on disembark is not a good choice. The 3-inch rule is the same. What? That's just how disembarkation works currently. I'm confused. Yeah, so I'm sure that there is a reason to have this combat disembark. I just don't know what it is. So if I arrive from reserve or I made a normal move, I use a quick disembark. If I remain stationary or I haven't yet moved, I make a tactical disembark. If I advance or fell back, I can't disembark. So it's like if I am required to disembark at any other point, maybe? Combat disembarks are when the transport is engaged? I don't know if that's the case, because I'm eligible. It doesn't say anything about my transport being engaged. If it starts engaged and falls back, I just can't do it. And otherwise, if it's remained stationary or I haven't selected it to move, I will just use tactical disembark. Oh, you know what it is? It's for you got it, chat. Yeah, you got it. The chat's ahead of me here. It's if I tried to use tactical or quick disembarkation and I don't have enough space for my unit, then I use combat disembarkation. You guys are so right. You're so right. Because of the modal movement rule earlier, where it says that if I attempt a mode of movement and that mode can't be completed, I basically like reacquired the next one. I go down the line. So like if I attempt a tactical disembark, but my opponent has a bunch of shit near me, I end up doing a combat disembark and taking hazardous checks and becoming battle shocked and stuff. Interesting. Okay, well that's very fascinating. I like that. I could also be engaged, yeah. But I think that yeah, I guess like in most cases I would end up doing like I'm required to do quick disembarks normally. Tactical disembark is like a quick disembark that's slightly better because it gives you more things to do, and it has a more open like array of situations I could use it in. But it doesn't seem like I can. In most instances, I'm not able to choose to combat disembark intentionally, right? It basically explicitly requires that like I fulfill the criteria, because in most cases I'm going to be able to quick disembark, and quick disembark overrides the other ones. I guess it would be like if my transport is stuck is currently stuck in melee and I attempt to tactical disembark, then I would combat disembark instead. Cool. All right. Emergency disembarkation moves are different. They occur when a transport is destroyed. I'll make a hazard roll for each model in the unit before moving. Then place each model entirely within the placement distance of the transport as close to it as possible. This is what we were talking about earlier, where we got really confused because they said in the live stream, you must, when disembarking, you must place as close as possible to the transport. And then they revealed the transport rules, which said nothing about that. And we were like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But it turns out it is only for emergency disembarkations, which they didn't make clear, in fairness. You are battle shocked, ineligible to declare a charge. So you can't use any of these other disembarkations if you die to Overwatch or something. I was not aware of this when I said that. So if you like get killed at the end of if your transport gets killed at the end of your movement phase, you just hop out using emergency disembarkation and eat a bunch of damage probably. There's also a sidebar for rapid disembark. After you've made an arrival move, models must follow the same rules. Oh, this is the ability for when you come out of ingress, you can drop out of your transport, and you must follow all the same rules and restrictions you had to follow in resolving the movement. What's interesting is that in situations where you can 6-inch deep strike a transport, you could then 6-inch reserve all the guys inside of it, which is, I think, an issue in 10th edition, because there are some instances in which you can close reserve a vehicle, then the unit inside has to set up farther away from the screening unit than the vehicle is, which is super fucked. Attached units is probably going to be a can of worms. I think I'm going to take a very quick break to run to the bathroom chat, because otherwise I'm going to get a little feisty. But then after that, we will talk about characters, and we will most likely talk about precision stuff, which I think a lot of people had questions about. So give me about 2 minutes and I'll be back. We are back, chat. Let's talk about some frickin' characters. All right, attached units. Everything you heard anyone say is that when you disembark, it's a base conflict with the hull. Yeah, so that was because they misled us on the live stream. The live stream, they said, and I looked this up the other day. I even timestamped it in my Discord because I was like, did I just Mandela effect a whole rule? In the live stream, a rhino was destroyed, and one of the commentators, it was Adam Camilleri, he said, In 11th edition, when you disembark, each model has to disembark as close as possible to the hull of the transport, and so they ringed the transport with all of the Plague Marines that had disembarked. And so and I think everyone else who did coverage of the live stream went, new disembarkation rules. When you disembark, you have to be in base contact with the transport. What he meant was that when you disembark from a destroyed transport, you must place as close as possible. And so that's what we have. When you emergency disembark from a transport that's blown up, you place as close as possible. When you disembark normally, the rules are basically the same. There's just like cool little thing you can do to prevent yourself from being locked inside a transport, but that's about it. All right. Let's talk about some stuff. Forming attached units. You can either have leader or support on your data sheets. Before the battle, at the muster army step, for each leader and support unit in your army, you may choose one friendly bodyguard unit that they can lead. That unit will then lead the bodyguard unit for the battle and forms an attached unit. Unless otherwise stated, each bodyguard can only have one leader and one support. Oh, interesting. So they had discussed, and maybe this isn't the case. I don't think necessarily that it's not. But they had just talked about in one of the previous streams that support units were required to attach, and it doesn't seem like that's the case. But maybe there's additional requirements in here. If the unit contains one or more bodyguard units when you're attacking it, use the highest. I imagine that's toughness. That must be toughness, right, chat? Toughness characteristic of bodyguard models of the unit when resolving attacks. Even if the leader or support of this attached unit has a different toughness characteristic, if the unit contains only leader support models, use the highest toughness characteristic of those models in resolving attacks. Cool. Rules that are triggered when a unit is destroyed are triggered only when the last model in the unit that began the battle in an attached unit is destroyed. So it requires that you kill everyone in the unit, including all the characters, to get benefits of killing it. So their attached units are going to be extremely difficult to remove in one fell swoop. Especially because, like, don't forget, the characters are always at the end of your wound allocation sequence and will typically have better saves. So the characters, more often than not, will survive incoming attacks if they have bodyguard models at all. An attached unit has all the keywords of all the units that compose it. In fact, an attached unit is only affected by the slightest rule applying to units with any one of those keywords. I don't know what that means, but okay. The models of an attached unit do not gain the keywords of other models of that unit if they do not already have them. Models of an attached unit do not gain the keywords of other models of that unit. Oh, the models don't. The units do, but the models don't. I understand what they're talking about. Remember that attacks target units, not models. Yes, indeed. They use anti-psyker as a thing. We love that. E is endurance or eclair. Incredible. Abilities or rules affecting a single specific model always apply to that model alone, even when part of an attached unit. Otherwise, this is important because this is an open question in 10th edition. Abilities or rules affecting a unit apply to all models of an attached unit until the source of the ability or rule is destroyed, as detailed below. If the source is a leader or support unit, it is until the last model of the leader or support unit is destroyed. If it is the bodyguard unit, such as a datasheet ability, it applies until the last model of the bodyguard unit is destroyed. Or if it is a specific model, such as a banner bearer or something, it is until that model is destroyed. This is fucking sick. Okay, so this doesn't we haven't seen like a healing or whatever, which I'm sure will probably be covered later. However, what we do see is, for example, this was like a question came up earlier today. What happens if I'm in a chosen unit and all the chosen are destroyed, but I still have Masters of the Maelstrom left? Well, all the models for whom data... I mean, that's actually probably not a good example because there's a weird thing about joining units, which who knows if that'll get changed. But in any case, let's say I have a unit that falls back and shoots, and I have a character in it who doesn't. As soon as the last model in the unit whose datasheet has on it the fallback and shoot ability, I lose that entirely. We'll see if joining units and embedding as a attached thing continues to be a thing in the new edition. I kind of hope it doesn't. I hope they just become support characters that just join into a unit, but we'll see. Heal's not in this document. Well, R.I.P. There is like there's 2 sections missing, which I think will cover a lot of like the keywords we haven't talked about yet. Strat reserves. Placing units in strat reserves. We can't put fortifications in because Games Workshop hates fun. The total points of all strat reserve units cannot exceed 50% of the points limit for your format. Interesting. So strategic reserve units have a much greater expanded cap now. It's 50% for the whole army instead of 25% for strat reserves and the remaining 25 of 50% for regular reserves. Very curious. Repositioned units are removed from the battlefield and placed into strategic reserve during the battle. Units that use such roles are called repositioned units besides other roles that apply to such units. All of the following rules apply to them. If these units were used in the movement phase, they may be used on units that already moved. A repositioned unit that is placed in the same turn and made an advanced fallback move still counts as making it. When units removed from the battlefield, any role that was affecting them for a specific duration continues to affect them as long as it's okay. That's the same as the current rules. Arriving from a strategic reserve. You have a placement distance of 6. You place entirely within the placement distance of one or more battlefield edges and more than 8 inches from enemy units. At the third battle round, unless otherwise stated, all strategic reserve units that have not performed one or more arrival moves are kind of like that verbiage, are destroyed with the following exceptions: units embarked in transports that performed arrival moves and repositioned units. Neat. No cutout for large unit placement. That's problematic. How do we reserve a Baneblade? Units and transports, I believe, do count towards the reserve movement. Yep. Including units embarked in transports that are themselves placed in strategic reserve. Another thing, chat, no restriction on the number of units that can start the game in reserve. Only a restriction on the points value. I love this. The much cleaner. If you're bigger than 6 inches, get absolutely fucked, is the answer. Here's another funny thing that I brought this up in 8th edition and everyone laughed at me, but I don't think it's ever been ruled on. The edge of the battlefield, is the edge of the battlefield the physical edge of the mat, or is it an infinitely tall cube? And edge is like within the plane, the vertical plane of that edge. The reason for that is that 6 inches off of a line means that your edge of battlefield, 6 inches of the edge of battlefield would actually be a like a quarter circle, right? It would be like this cone, this like funny cone shape. Which means if you are particularly tall but not necessarily wide, it could prevent you from arriving. And I asked people that, and they were like, "That's stupid." And I was like, "Is it?" Because it actually determines whether or not a lot of units can strategic reserve. What is a battlefield edge? I imagine battlefield edge is defined in the first 2 chapters of the book that we don't have. Yeah, the guard do have the 1 detachment for sure. But this just removes entirely the rule where you can come in off your own table edge. It's just gone. Also, arrival moves only eligible on the second battle round. I believe that they have entirely removed turn 1 up down. I don't really see any way that you can. I don't see any like rule that allows you to come in earlier. For now, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't like nothing of value was lost. I think it was like crazy powerful for the armies that had it, and less, kind of shitty for the armies that didn't. I think that brings everything to a more level playing field on the first battle round, which is good. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, data. So like stuff that like like drop pods and stuff, right? This is like you can come in first battle round will override this restriction, but it doesn't seem that anything else will be able to. So even if I go in top of the first turn, or top of turn 1, if I go into reserve, bottom of turn 1, it's still first battle round, so I'm still ineligible to make an arrival move. Unlike the current edition, where you just set yourself back up. Also, kudos to them for finally putting it in the fucking core rules and not in every mission they've ever printed. Stupid. I can't believe it took them 6 years to finally codify no turn 1 deep strikes. Bro. That's longer than 6 years, actually. It was like since the start of 8th. Like 8th edition had turn 1 deep strikes. Which was 2017? Like 9 years ago? It's been 9. It's almost a full decade before they put that rule in their core rulebook. That's fucking wild, dude. Oh my god. Logan, I think, will explicitly allow stuff to come in turn 1. I imagine that all of the stuff that says like arrive from strategic reserve turn 1, or treat the battle round number as being higher than it currently is, will say like select one friendly Space Wolf unit in reserve. They could just say the same thing, actually. They'll probably say for the purposes of arrival moves instead of for the purposes of being set up on the battlefield. Treat the battle run number as being one higher than it currently is, because it means that you could turn one ingress, or you could turn one deep strike. You can turn one. I'm calling it arrival moves, but I know it's ingress moves in my heart. You can turn one deep strike. You can turn one strat reserve, and you can turn 2 strat reserve into your opponent's deployment zone. And so basically they just have to change this one sentence, but like we all kind of know what it's supposed to do, right? I think we get the idea. All right, flying and momentum. Momentum moves are performed as described below. You're eligible if all of the following apply. Your rule allowing this movement type was triggered. Your unit is not battle shocked. It's not engaged. It's not yet moved. It moves as described as movement. Chooses the nearest enemy unit as the movement. Oh, this is Surge. Is this Surge? Somebody help me. I think this is Surge, chat. It's like momentum. Is this like an impact attack? What are we doing? Surge moves. This is going through like this weird cursed version of the rulebook's actually kind of fun. We get fun little Easter eggs where we get to piece together. It's like a puzzle. We're piecing together what rule we're actually reading. Okay. So you are not battle shocked. You are not engaged. You have not already moved in the phase. So you can't surge off of Overwatch, no, generally speaking. You also can't surge into a reactive. Or you can't reactive into a surge, because you cannot have already moved. Which is good. So you can't do the like in response to shooting I'll move and then you get shot and then you're like now I'll surge move, because if you've already moved then you're done. You must end its move engaged with the momentum target, the surge target. Each model that cannot end its move engaged with the surge target must end its move as close as possible to the surge target. Chat! We have done it! We have finally stopped surge moves from being a stupid can of worms. So every model in the unit must go either to engagement range with the closest enemy or directly towards them. You cannot now choose one model in your unit, move them into base contact, and then move everyone else the opposite direction. Everyone goes directly towards. Let's go! I'm so in. Play an online game with 50 French players. You get stuff you'll ask them. Love that. Very good. Flying models. If you have the fly keyword, we know how this rule works. You can choose to get -2 to move to go over things and through friendly models. We love that. All right. Abilities. Aura abilities. Abilities affecting models or units within a given range are auras. I think most of these. I love that these are codified. This makes me so happy. But I don't know necessarily if if we need to. go through all of them. Should we talk about Aerodynes, chat? We're playing Cyberpunk 2077. What if their surge move will bring them into engagement range of another unit? So the one, it doesn't matter which one shoots you for surge moves. Surge moves always choose the closest unit. It always goes to the closest. It doesn't matter who attacked you. It's always closest. And you can't, and it also specifies you cannot engage anything else that weren't your surge target. So you go towards the closest and you can't engage anything else. Unlike pile-in moves, it is explicit. All right. At the start of the declared battle formation step, all Aerodyne units, which is their name now, must be placed in strategic reserve. Aerodyne units are only eligible to perform an ingress move. They're not eligible to perform any other movement types. At the end of the opponent's turn, all Aerodyne units in your army that are on the battlefield must be placed into strategic reserve. Each time any unit performs any movement, its models may move through Aerodyne models. Each time a unit performs an insertion move, a pile-in, consolidation, or surge move, unless that unit can fly, it ignores Aerodynes. Being engaged with only one or more Aerodyne units does not prevent the unit from being able to perform a normal move or an advance. Plunging fire rule has no effect on Aerodynes, unlike Titanic stuff. Aerodynes are not eligible to declare a charge, and they can only make melee attacks targeting flying models. Okay. It doesn't say anything about hover, chat. Let's take a peek. All right. There is this stationary rule, which I imagine is hover, because it explicitly disguises aircraft. Some Aerodynes are fitted with vector thrusters or anti-grav technology, allowing to hover in place. Oh no, is this on the land speeder? Hold up. This isn't the land speeder thing, is it? Shit. Where's the land speeder data sheet? Did they talk about this? No. Okay. I imagine this is the same thing. I have no idea. Each time it takes off, which is the rule that means that says that you can go over things, it doesn't get -2 to its maximum distance. Huh. Well, I don't know. I do like the new Aerodyne rule. I think it's neat. I hopefully will find, maybe there's a mistranslation of hover in here and it describes exactly how that works, but we'll see. Because I have no idea. We'll find out, I suppose. All right. We'll talk about abilities. We can sort of like cut through most of these because we can kind of because we know what most of them do, including the at-risk keyword, chat. How many at-risk what do we think an at-risk weapon does? Oh, that's so funny. Here's a weird thing about at-risk weapons. When you suffer damage from them, nothing specifies who takes the hit. So you take a number of hazard rolls, but it just assigns to the unit normally. So theoretically, you can assign to models that don't necessarily have hazardous weapons, which is actually crazy. So having like plasma pistols in your unit doesn't necessarily kill the plasma pistols. We'll see. We'll see if that ends up making it all the way in. Because I don't believe that was a cutout in the mortal wound section, but somebody can, what's the word? Correct me if I'm wrong. Your catch, yeah. I actually kind of like that. It's like backblast clear, and the guy's like, "What?" And it just gets blown away. It doesn't necessarily blow the gun up; it just kills a guy. Slaughter is the new cleave. You get extra attacks for each 5 models. Extra attacks is extra attacks. You can attack in addition with extra attack weapons. Blast gets you extra stuff. Close range, containing 1 or more models with the close range weapon may shoot using close combat shooting. This is close combat or close quarters shooting stuff. Oh, interesting, chat. Pistol does have a call out. I'm curious as to whether this is actually in the rules here. Okay. I guess it has a tough time loading through all the pages, so I'm not going to worry about it. I guess they just included pistol because all of the previous editions, pistol weapons, have had pistol, and they don't want to go fix them. That's interesting. So I do wonder if the weird hallucination that turned close quarters into pistol earlier was because it had like pre-read this section. That's curious. Fight first. We know about devastating wounds. Each attack of a devastating wound weapon that suffers a critical wound. The attack sequence for the attack ends. The target suffers a number of warm wounds equal to the damage characteristic of the weapon. These are inflicted after resolving any normal damage inflicted by those attacks. Mortal wounds inflicted by devastating wounds can damage a maximum of 1 model per critical wound. All remaining mortal wounds inflicted by that attack are lost. 1 model per critical wound. Interesting. So this, it seems like, occurs at the end of each attack pool, right? So you gather your dice and you roll them, and then you inflict mortal wounds at the end of that. But it inflicts on the to the order in which the mortal wound sequence occurs, not necessarily the attack sequence. So you could potentially inflict devastating wounds to a save category or an allocation group that wasn't chosen as the allocation group to take the saves for the attack, which is pretty weird. It turns out guns do kill people. People are at risk in the vicinity of guns, indeed. That's bizarre, and I'm curious to see the actual rolls for hazardous and devastating, because I think there's some weirdness there. Infiltrate. During deployment, if all models in the unit have the ability, they can place anywhere on the battlefield more than 8 inches horizontally from the opponent's deployment edge and enemy units. We have seen that it seems like every exclusion zone for every ability in the game has moved to 8 inches. And I made this comment when we were looking at the scout move. I didn't put it in my video because I wasn't sure, but I made the comment during the live stream that it looked like they were scouting outside 8 of people instead of outside 9. But it's like you're on a parallax on an overhead camera, and a 1 inch difference, 15% difference or whatever on a measurement is really tough to eyeball. But I was like, zoom, enhance. I'm pretty sure that rule's different. And it certainly seems to be the case. Heavy. If you are not engaged, you've not been placed on the battlefield this turn, and no model in the unit has moved more than 3 inches, you gain +1 to hit. Not +1 ballistic skill, +1 to hit. Super heavy walker. Oh, cool. That's the knight ability, and it's just codified in the rules. If you do not have... Oh, you can decide to have the mobile keyword and the chance of being battle shocked. Twin linked. Reroll or wound roll. Torrent. Automatically hit. Lethal hit. Explicitly doesn't work with devastating wounds. Rapid fire, get extra stuff. Precision. This is the big one. When resolving attacks made with 1 or more precision weapons at the start of the allocation order step, if the target unit contains 1 or more visible character models from 1 or more attacking models, the active player may choose 1 allocation group that contains 1 of those visible character models. If so, the attacks are resolved, or until the attacks are resolved, or until that character group is destroyed, whichever comes first. That character group is the current allocation group. Oh. That is significantly different than what we were led to believe based on the live streams. So the implication, but in fairness, not explicitly stated, was the implication was that precision weapons allowed you to order allocation groups. This chooses a character and puts them at the top of the allocation sequence if you can see them. Which basically means It is very marginally stronger than the current precision, but not significantly so. Or you can choose not to trigger lethal. Oh, that's true. So you could roll damage if you wanted to trigger devastating. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. So you force saves. You force saves with precision weapons. The target unit contains one or more visible character models from one or more attacking models. I actually wonder what page are we on right now? I can't tell. I actually wonder when you are described to be an attacking model. Because I think it's relevant. So you resolve attacks according to the sequence. The attacks in the dice rolled in the gather attack dice step are considered attacks made by unattacking model. Nothing refers to attacking models before that, which means I assume precision requires that the currently active attack dice group or attack pool, it has the precision keyword. Because don't forget, you only gather like attack pools if all of those attacks are affected by the same abilities. So if I have the precision ability on some of my weapons, but not my other weapons, I have to resolve the precision attack separately. In fact, I think I have to resolve them separately, even if you don't have a character, right? Although that might be like open to interpretation. The rule that determines whether or not you're being affected by an ability is like kind of weird, at least in this translation. But that's okay. It doesn't matter here or there. But I need a precision weapon, and it seems to me that I need one of the models that has a precision weapon to see the character in the unit. If I do so, I choose that one character. I don't choose more than one. So previous in the current in 10th edition, you could precision out all their characters in one go. If you had like hit somebody with a bloodthirster and you epic challenge, you could kill everyone. But you choose one character when you go to roll your attacks to inflict the precision on, and you shuffle that character from the bottom of the allocation group or order to the top of the allocation order, which means they probably die like immediately because you'll roll a bunch of saves and then you'll roll a bunch of ones and they'll go in the character. It doesn't let you shuffle the allocation order of non-character entities in the unit. And it doesn't let you shuffle the character. It doesn't let you shuffle more than one character. If the unit contains one or more visible character models from one or more of the attacking models, you can choose one allocation group that contains one of those character models. And don't forget, all character models are their own individual allocation groups by definition. So you're only ever hitting one character model precision attacks. It's actually they might have made precision less useful. It is like very slightly different than current precision, because current precision is like I force the character to take saves until they fail enough saves that they die. Now it's you roll all your dice and all the ones go on the character and they die immediately, basically. So like it's smaller in scope. I don't get to hit as many models with it. I don't get to apply as many attacks to them. However, it does mean and I can't do anything to the non-characters, and I only ever hit one character with it. However, it does mean that if I have a high enough attack volume, that character's almost instantaneously dead, and I still get to assign a bunch of saves onto the bodyguard. So like, yeah, it's a side grade, but a side grade of like the worst keyword in the game is like not a particularly strong endorsement. I don't know. This is very interesting. Because I think, like many of you, thought that this keyword was about to be broken. The way they made it sound on the live streams, where it was just like, yeah, you pick allocation groups. You're like, what the fuck? That's nuts. I can like shuffle your storm shields in front of the rest of your unit. That's not how it works. Interesting. Can you allocate damage to characters that you don't see? Kind of. The answer is kind of. So if I have multiple precision attacks in a unit, and one of those models, so if I have like, a good example is like Shroud Runners, let's say. So like Shroud Runners, and I have one Shroud Runner that can see your character. I can take all my long rifle shots. I can take all my long rifle shots and I can assign them all to your character. So unlike the current thing where an attack from a precision weapon that targets a visible character could choose to bounce that attack onto the visible character, now as soon as one precision weapon can see your character, all the precision weapons in the same attack pool that guy has can target the character. Does that mean the character is in front for the subsequent scatter lasers? It does not. Because it only works until the precision attacks are resolved. At least to my reading, I believe that's how that works. So basically, if I was a Shroud Runner unit, and I would, like, one of my Shroud Runners, like, edges out in the corner so he can see your character, I go, I'm going to resolve all my long rifle attacks. They're all precision, and one long rifle carrier can see your character. So I'm going to roll all my long rifle attacks, and I'm going to choose to use precision, which puts that character at the top of the allocation group. Once I resolve all the long rifle attacks, you take all your saves, starting with the lowest rolls on the character. We then move on, and I roll my scatter lasers, and your character goes back down to the bottom of the allocation group, is what it seems like. Yeah, so it does require the character to be at least a little bit visible. What you can't do is like shoot a random unit on the guy on the side of the unit and then apply all of the precision attacks to the character. If none of your snipers can see the character, it doesn't work. The other weird thing is that it seems to be is if you have multiple different kinds of precision attacks, they don't necessarily like all work together. So if I have I don't know when this would be the case, but like if I have two different precision attack profiles, like if I had a sniper rifle and a character with a precision range weapon, and the sniper rifle could see the enemy character, but my character couldn't, because assumingly those two weapons would be in different attack groups, they would not both draw the line of sight from the sniper rifle, if that makes sense. So interesting. How does precision work with Gaz and Makari? They're both character models, right? So you can allocate to whichever one you can see, which I think is the same way it works currently. So it's like if I can see Makari, I could dump all like precision attacks of Makari, or if I can see Gaz, I can dump all like precision attacks on Gaz. In a lot of cases, it will be in 100% a dead character for sure. It is true. Interesting. That's interesting to note. Psychic weapons, ignore weapon scale, ballistic scale, characteristic modifiers to hit roll. You're also considered a psychic attack. We've seen that one before. Sustained hits. We've seen that one. One shot. We know what that one does. Solo agent, I think, means lone operative. We know what that one does. What's interesting is that in the GSC article earlier, or not in the GSC article, in the AdMech article, they said that lone operative would always come with a number. Oh, here we go. If this ability takes the form of lone operative X, Non-operative necessary or definitionally is 12 unless otherwise specified, in which case it changes to a different number. I see. Neat. Support seems to be that they maybe didn't give us the right information earlier, and it seems like you can attach it alongside a character optionally if you want to. Support and leader. Deep strike. Each time you perform a rival move, you can place anywhere on the battlefield more than 8 inches away from enemy units, including in the opponent's deployment zone. Fusion, I imagine, is also the Melta weapon. Within half range or less of the weapon, it shoots target steps until the attacking unit has been resolved. Add X to the damage characteristic. Ignore cover. Scout. This ability always takes the form of Scout X. And resolve previous abilities. Step. If all models in a unit have this ability, you may do one of the following. If it is in strategic reserve, you can place it anywhere within your deployment zone. Oh, okay. So you choose to strat reserve scouts at the beginning of the game, then can pre-deploy them if you wish to. That's really cool. Or it can perform a scout move if it is in your deployment zone, which is why it doesn't work with infiltrate. Did we see infiltrate? During deployment, if all models have this ability. I do wonder, and this might require clarification, if that could allow you... No, it wouldn't allow you to scout into infiltration, because this says you can set up into your deployment zone. So just kidding. I was like, could it be that if I both infiltrate and scout, I could choose to scout into an infiltration position? The answer is no. If you are embarked in a dedicated transport that is entirely within your deployment zone, and all models in that dedicated transport have the scout ability, the transport also performs a scout move with it, which is, I imagine, well, yeah, what this is. And it is 8 inches, just like we talked about earlier. We love it. Yeah, I think Scout sounds very interesting. The sad part is the loss of Scout plus Infiltrate. That sounds like... It feels very ham-fisted, to be honest, where they were like, we just don't like this interaction, even though we fucking wrote it on 1 million units. So, like, I don't know, they just don't work anymore. And it's like, let them do something different, right? If you don't like that they work together, give them a different effect. But instead, they just made it so that... And you just lose Infiltrate if you ever try to use the Scout ability, which is kind of shitty. But it is what it is. Stationary we talked about. Firing deck. Can shoot off the top. Psychic, which talked about... Psychic twice? Weird. Okay. Hazardous destruction, deadly demise. Each time a model of this unit is destroyed after any units were embarked have imparted emergency disembarkation moves, roll a d6. On a 6, you undergo a hazardous destruction. I love this fucking translation, chat. Each time, each unit within 6 inches or less of this model suffers mortal wounds equal to X. If X is a random number, make a separate roll for each model. Yep. Okay, stealth. You always have cover. Starting strength and half strength. This is all stuff I don't think that we need to look over again. Battle shock. Oh, this is the starting stuff that we didn't get to see earlier. Oh, interesting. Okay. The number of models in a unit contains the start of the first battle round is its starting strength. Oh, cool. So first battle round, which means that if you combat squad a unit inside a transport, it recalculates its starting strength automatically. Whereas in 10th edition, that required an FAQ because it actually didn't tell you what your starting strength was if you combat squadded early. It was actually kind of a nightmare. There was a chance that every time... There's a chance that basically, like, if you attached a character into a unit and then combat squadded the unit, the combat squads immediately started battle shocking. Which is very stupid. Which, like, Sisters players were like, but don't I get +1 to wound now? And you're like, no. Calm down. That eventually got fixed. That's cool. Starting strength of 1. You're below starting strength if your number remaining wounds count is less than your wounds characteristic. Remaining wounds count or half your wounds characteristic. You're below half strength if the wounds of the model are less than half its wounds characteristic. Cool. Sidebar. Units that cannot be at half strength. If the wounds characteristic of a model, or if the starting strength of a unit cannot be divided by 2 equally, that model cannot be at half strength. Oh, but can be below half strength. Okay, so that's like if you have 3 wounds. They're like, how do you get to half strength? And the answer is you don't. Fair enough. I like these little clarifications here. Oh, here's a question we had. I think is probably easily answerable. It's a terrain question that always comes up. I'd like to reinforce my own knowledge of, which is that this qualifier for dense terrain still refers to model, not unit, which I know is going to come up a million times. Okay, there's some diagrams, which we don't really need to look at. So we're missing a couple things here. Hover, right, is just gone. So hover vehicles might just not exist anymore, but I doubt it. So we said arrow might do it. Would that be like up in here somewhere? No. So I don't know how hover works. Stationary is hover, but it doesn't tell you how to apply it, right? Well, aerodyne, I think, is just a mistranslation of aircraft. To be clear, I think that's just a mistranslation. But so what it doesn't say is like how you activate hover, right? So like the stationary keyword may very well be the hover keyword, but it doesn't say how you get it. Because an aircraft unit by definition never moves normally. So the effect, if it affects only aircraft, doesn't do anything. Or did I just lose it? Stationary is here. Yeah. I've lost it. Do monsters ignore your own monsters in movement? They do not. The normal movement rules don't say anything about monsters and vehicles, but the monster and vehicle rules specifically say that monsters cannot move through friendly monsters unless otherwise specified. If you fly, you can like pay the two points to go over. Float is hover in French. Nope, we got nothing. Yeah. So I don't know. Stationary, I could see being, I don't know, just some sort of like jump jet ability. Like we could see it go on like crisis battle suits or something, where they just like, because they have jump jets, they just like hover around. But I don't know. It also, this also like specifically calls out aircraft in the flavor text. The problem is that like I don't know how you use this, right? And it must be that we're missing a section. The other thing is heal, which was never covered. So I think we're probably missing a section there. Because there's a lot of questions about like, what if my whole unit dies but my characters are alive? Can I regenerate models that aren't on the battlefield? Like, can I regenerate models to a datasheet that isn't on the battlefield anymore? I have no idea. And if we look at this, there's like basically an entire chapter missing from the beginning. I think we saw a little bit of chapter 1, but chapter 2 is totally gone in my to my experience here. Look at an example in the starting strength bit. A captain of one model is attached to an intercessor squad of 5 models. The attached unit has a strength of 6. If 3 intercessors are destroyed, the unit will be at half strength. If 4 intercessors are destroyed, the unit will be below half strength. If all the intercessors are destroyed, the remaining captain will be below half strength. Pivot's in there. Yeah, pivot is free. There's a whole diagram about it. Rotating your models is like crazy strong now. Look at this shit, chat. You just spin around. You just do a little spin. Whee! Whee! So what was the question about starting strength? If you lose the captain, you're going to be at 5 out of 6 models, so you're above half. Toss the section into ChatGPT. We'll just like, yeah, we'll keep going even harder into the AI hallucination. There'll be a rule to measure vehicles from middle. Hull measurement. So you always measure, like you basically measure, like you always rotate models from the middle, but you measure models from the closest part of the hull. It explicitly calls out hull is going to be a keyword now that goes on your data sheet and describes how you measure. And hull measurement always measures from the closest part, just like it does currently. So that is what it is. If you lose the intercessors, is the captain below half strength? He is. Because he's permanently attached to the unit when you construct the list. He basically considers the intercessors part of his unit. He himself considers himself to be at a starting strength of 6, which means if the intercessors are dead, then he's by himself, but he's below his starting strength of 6. Do leaders keep bodyguard abilities if all the bodyguards are dead? No. If your bodyguard units are destroyed, any datasheet sourced from models in your unit is removed as soon as all of the models supplying that ability are gone. So if you're inside a unit that's giving you an ability and the unit dies, you lose that effect. I will say, chat, I'm running a little tad late, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and ramp the stream up here. I think we covered everything, which honestly shocks me. I'm really shout out to the Black Crusade Open finals for going really fast. So we got to talk about these, which is cool. Leaders and support are not two different units if they lose their bodyguard. Correct. They're in the same unit. And there are, in fact, rules governing which abilities they keep, which abilities they lose, and how damage is distributed between them. But they are locked in permanently. If a leader keeps his ability, that says he gets it if he's leading a unit. So that, I think, is an open question, because I think that's going to be an errata. Because, most of the character abilities are just like this model's unit gains X. I don't know if it is explicit when you are considered to or not to be leading a unit. In fact, chat, leading does not appear anywhere in this document. So I think the leading a unit nomenclature is probably gone. You just become part of an attached unit when you join in. So what I imagine is that there will be a blanket FAQ in the rules commentary on day 1 that says any ability that says this applies when you're leading a unit is changed to this unit gains. I wonder if Lycos will change. No, I don't think anything that gains part of their utility from their bodyguard unit will change. I would not expect to see that change be made. I think anything that's like Phoenix Lords or like Lord of Contagions, like I can't 6 Cheap Strike without my friends or whatever. I think those are all going to be. I would not expect to see those change. That would surprise me. Reanimation protocols and Necron characters, I think, remains to be seen. Like I said, the heal rules aren't in here, so I don't know. We'll find out, chats. Yeah, healing is going to be really questionable. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, if you could lose the unit, Eternal Revenant, regenerate the character, reanimate the unit, and then like Resorb, Necrons are going to be silly. But also, they have to stay within 9 inches to do that. So it's like, honestly, it's like kind of a side grade. Like real talk, chat. You get to reanimate your unit a lot, but Monkey's Paw Curls you can only do so on one objective. The warrior squad's like, no, no, my greed. I wanted to be invincible, and you made me slow. No. Yeah, I don't know. Has anyone done a what's difference edition chat? We got this like 4 hours ago. Calm your tits, chat. Jesus Christ. We literally got this briefly before we started streaming. Oh my god. I might do a video tonight. It depends on how much time I have, but we'll see. I do have some stuff to do. Anyway, folks, that is going to be it for me, I think, today. I do have to get going because I think I'm running late now. Oh, I didn't mean to click off the thing that quickly. But I do want to say thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me for this impromptu stream of a cursed mistranslation of the rulebook. There's definitely lots of open questions that we still have, but this gives us a much better example, a much better idea of how the rules work. If I wasn't live streaming a tournament this weekend, I would be rocking all of these on TTS all weekend, but unfortunately, I will be live streaming. Fortunately for you, that means that we can keep talking about these for the next 2 consecutive days. So I'm gonna be leaving tomorrow and traveling. I'll be live tomorrow morning with the next faction focus article, and then I'll be leaving tomorrow afternoon to go over to that event. I'm going to stream the Spring Slam GT, so please come hang out with me over there. I'm going to drop a redirect to the live stream event for that event momentarily as soon as I'm done with this live stream. And so I will see you tomorrow morning, and then I will see you on Saturday morning for tons of 40k. It's 40k 24/7 over here on Tactical Tortoise. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me, and I will see you then. Cheers, everybody. Keep it classy, folks. Have happy wargaming.